The story begins somewhere in East Africa during the night. Desperate screams echo through the dark forest. A fallen soldier bleeds on the ground, complaining that no one warned them. The others fire wildly in a panic because of the Reaper. But a mysterious figure with a knife advances amidst the gunfire. A shooter screams in terror while unloading his weapon, and in that same instant, his throat is slashed. The soldier loses his life as blood sprays. The body falls lifeless at the feet of the ruthless assassin. A man hiding nearby thinks about how one soldier can change the course of a war. This warrior carries terrifying nicknames like the Reaper and the Monster. He is the mercenary without a will of his own, known as Masamune Corona. Everyone on that battlefield knows those titles belong to him. Shortly after, the scene shifts to a cabin in the woods. Masamune opens the door and enters the hideout in silence. Commander Zach Davis welcomes him back. Several other mercenaries from the squad are sitting and waiting. Everyone pays attention as the meeting is about to begin. Masamune reports that there were 20 enemies at the location, and then he reveals that they were all wiped out without exception. The commander slams his fist hard on the table. Zack asks furiously who gave him permission to act alone. The young man replies that he simply followed the reconnaissance order. The leader yells that he never ordered the entire group to be eliminated, but he soon calms down and asks to hear the rest of the report. Zack smiles, saying there is no problem with him having cleared the area. Masamune explains that the troops and equipment were pathetic. He says he found an empty building and returned without being noticed. Satisfied with the work, the commander orders them to get ready. The mercenaries stand up quickly to carry out the order. The squad advances through the dark forest until the young man stops. The commander questions the reason, and the young man warns that something is wrong. Arriving at the scene of the massacre, they see only 19 bodies. Masamune guarantees that he killed 20 and notes that one is missing. Max suggests a counting error, but Mayu defends her companion. Victor mocks him, saying that he simply failed to kill the last one. Isha intervenes, stating that they should confirm the situation. Zack stands deep in thought with his arms crossed. The leader then asks for the scout's opinion. Masamune coldly deduces that someone from another group took the body. Max realizes that the enemies already know they are there. The young man then suggests that the team retreat immediately. However, the commander gets irritated and denies that possibility. Aisha does not understand the decision, and Zack responds that they will advance. The leader explains that there will not be enough time for the enemy to prepare. Masamune tries to question the order, but Zack glares at him, asking if the command Dodd is going to argue. The young man widens his eyes upon hearing those words. A memory from the past resurfaces, telling him to simply follow orders. His former master taught that hesitation on the battlefield is death. Masamune masks his discomfort and says it is nothing. Zack makes it clear that he is the only one responsible for the decisions. The commander yells that the mercenary should only do what he is ordered to do. Masamune listens to the reprimand in absolute silence. The squad obeys the command and continues the advance. Masamune feels that his instincts are warning him to retreat. They arrive silently at the building that the scout had located. The young man observes the structure in the middle of the darkness. The mercenaries position themselves, attentive while they wait. Zack gives a signal and Masamune approaches the target. At that moment, a strange humming sound catches the young man's attention. He notices a drone hovering over him in the forest. Masamune reacts with surprise at the unexpected device. The young man questions how the enemy knew they were there. The drone points a gun barrel in his direction. Laser sights lock quickly onto the mercenary's body. Bursts of gunfire force the young man to dive to the ground. He protects himself behind a log, impressed by the power of the machine gun. The young man shouts in desperation, asking the commander for orders. However, he receives no response from his team. Masamune realizes with shock that he has been abandoned by everyone. He grinds his teeth, trying to maintain control of the situation. The mercenary notes that the weapon's precision is abnormal. He wonders if it is new technology that cancels out recoil. The drone continues flying and chasing the young man. He identifies signifies the emblem of the Armored Dominion Corporation on the frame. The young man recognizes the company that specializes in defense technology. Masamune runs between the trees, trying to find an opening. He believes he can dodge the shots if he is agile enough. The young man finds the autonomy and the equipment's tracking system strange. He performs an acrobatic maneuver to reposition himself in the forest. Masamune aims his pistol, ready to take down the target. The shot hits the drone, which explodes in mid-air. The young man lands on the ground, while the remains of the machine fall. He takes a deep breath, thinking he can handle one unit. The mercenary decides it is time to return to the base. He puts himself in an alert position with his weapons drawn. A metallic sound coming from the direction of the base paralyzes him. Heavy, rhythmic footsteps make the ground tremble. A gigantic robot emerges from between the trees in front of him. Masamune observes the mechanical creature completely stunned. He tries to understand if that is an exoskeleton or an autonomous weapon. The young man fires at the structure to test its resistance. The bullet merely ricochets off the metallic, armored surface. The mercenary panics when he sees that his weapon is useless. He deduces from the weight that the machine is not piloted by humans. The young man feels a chill at the complexity of that technology. The robot activates multiple combat drones around it. Masamune falls to the ground, realizing the machine is commanding the attack. He steadies both pistols for a final attempt at survival. Masamune performs a quick and aggressive maneuver to position himself. He fires both of his pistols simultaneously at the enemies. The bullets collide with precision against the combat drones. The mercenary leaps through the air, maintaining total control of the situation. His eyes glow with a dangerous intensity as he moves. He delivers a powerful kick that destroys the armor of a unit. After taking down the equipment, he faces the giant robot. The mercenary stands face to face with the machine that was taunting him. The robot emits an electronic message, praising the young man's adaptation. Masamune asks angrily if the machine knows who he is. The robot ignores the question and states. The young man lowered his guard. Suddenly, a hidden weapon strikes Masamune in the back. The young man bleeds from the wound as the pain takes over. He tries to understand what happened and why he was struck. The mercenary falls to the ground, losing his strength. He realizes too late that a traitor is embedded in the squad. Masamune sees the faces of his companions as his consciousness fades. He recalls the cruel orders while he dies surrounded by drones. His old master emerges in his thoughts, teaching the art of killing. The mentor's voice echoes, forbidding any hesitation on the battlefield. The master reiterates that to hesitate means to meet one's end. Zack yells that the mercenary must only obey his commander. The young man reflects that his life was shaped by someone else's will. He regrets not having noticed the betrayal before it was too late. The enemy drone continues firing while everything goes dark. Masamune wishes for a second chance to do everything differently. Suddenly, he wakes up in a completely different environment. A teacher calls his name in the middle of the classroom. The young man responds, startled by the call. He looks around, trying to process the new environment. Masamune finds himself sitting at an ordinary school desk. The teacher asks with an ironic tone if he had a good rest. The young man replies coldly that he managed to sleep very well. His classmates comment, impressed by his boldness. The teacher gets irritated and grips the chalk tightly. The school bell rings, interrupting the tension in the room. The young man puts his hand on his head, trying to organize his confusing memories. A student named Sakura Shirashi approaches, asking if he speaks English. Masamune stares at her, remembering how long it had been since he last saw her. A group of bullies approaches, ordering him to get out of their way. They mock the young man and demand that he go with them. He recognizes Nobusu Kurikawa and is stunned by the reality of the dream. Sakura seems concerned and asks if he is okay. The young man remembers how he used to follow his father's rules back in his school days. He remembers that he never fought back against the abuse and simply accepted the aggression. Nobusu pushes the young man and complains about his annoying attitude. The bully insults Masamune, saying that he has no talent whatsoever. He moves forward with a punch, promising to teach the young man a lesson. Masamune blocks the attack with the reflexes of a true assassin. Nobusuke widens his eyes, not believing his classmate's reaction. Masamune reasons that, if this is truly a dream, there is no problem in fighting back. Coldly, he invites the bully to try and hit him again. Nobusuke, furious, moves forward for a new attack. The aggressor delivers a punch against the young man, but ends up hitting his forehead. Nobusuke's accomplices cheer, thinking the hit was a success. Masamune remains motionless while the aggressor's fist hits him. The bully screams in pain immediately after the impact. He falls to his knees, holding his own hand, while Masamune watches without reacting. The protagonist reflects internally that the human skull is one of the most resistant parts of the body. Nobusuke, in shock, asks if the young man's head is made of steel. The bully tries to land one more blow, but desperation takes over his expression. Masamune blocks the attempt with a technical and precise movement. The aggressor falls to the ground moaning, paying the price for the botched execution of the blow. The protagonist maintains an intimidating and unshakable gaze. The other bully, startled by the scene, trembles with fear. They panic and run away from the scene. Masamune watches them move away with indifference. He notes that, despite being in his young body, the impact still causes considerable pain when blocking. The young man wonders if it is normal to feel pain in a dream. He walks alone through the area, starting to question if this is really just a hallucination. Sakura, watching from afar, approaches while the bullies finish fleeing. She calls him by name, showing concern. Masamune finally understands that he has been transported back to his junior high school days. He reflects on the possibility of having returned 8 years into the past, finding himself at only 15 years old. Sakura asks where he was, but soon changes the subject to the bully's behavior. The girl comments on the state in which the boys fled and asks if he did something. He denies any involvement, saying that they hurt themselves. Sakura accepts the answer but continues asking about his well-being. The young man suggests that they return to the classroom, leaving her confused. The student reflects on the strangeness of the statement that they hurt themselves on their own. She confesses that she cannot imagine Masamune defeating Nobusuke's group. The story continues, following the mysteries of this second chance at life. The setting is the 3rd year of junior high school. He understands that the world around him is the same as it was 8 years ago. Sakura's friends talk while he observes them in silence. The classmates laugh, living the typical school routine. Masamune remembers that, back then, he had no friends. He recalls how his tendency to repress emotions made him an easy target for bullies like Nobusuke. The young man feels that that school environment was never connected to his lonely life. Sakura calls him again, interrupting his thoughts. She offers help in case he needs to deal with the bullies again. The protagonist does not quite understand the reason for the girl's kindness. He realizes that, in his first life, no one ever treated him with such attention. The school bell rings, marking the beginning of another class. The teacher announces that they will resume the content on the Second World War. The class begins under the watchful eyes of the students. Masamune sits down, convinced that this is definitely not a dream. He recalls the moment of his death on the battlefield with clarity. Despite this, he finds himself alive, inhabiting his teenage body. Although he carries no deep regrets, he knows he did not intend to end his journey that way. Masamune reflects that the war is not over yet, and that, as long as peace is an illusion, he will continue to be a mercenary. His thoughts are abruptly interrupted when the teacher shouts his name. The teacher, visibly irritated, questions what the problem is with the student's attitude in class. The educator demands that he stop being distracted, receiving only a lackluster apology. The teacher, even more agitated, reacts with disbelief at seeing the young man's lack of concern. He calls Corona's attention again, clearly bothered by the apathetic behavior. Masamune keeps his focus on what really matters, thinking about the traitor and the ultimate weapon that awaits him. He decides that he will use the available time to prepare for whatever is necessary, while he answers the teacher. The teacher challenges Masamune to prove he was paying attention, asking about the German weapon of the Second World War. The whole class is surprised, as they never learned specific names of weapons in class. Without any hesitation, Masamune replies that it is the MP-40 submachine gun. The teacher is visibly shocked by the accuracy of the answer. Dissatisfied, he tries to corner the young man by asking about the ammunition and the magazine capacity. Masamune explains calmly that it uses 30 to 9mm rounds, but recommends 30 to avoid malfunctions. The entire room enters a silent uproar at the knowledge demonstrated by the boy. The teacher, grinding his teeth, is forced to admit that the answer is correct. The classmates exchange glances, clearly impressed by Masamune's mastery of the subject. Sakura watches the young man with a look of admiration, noting how much he seems to know. The teacher, still resentful, orders him to come to the principal's office immediately after class. Masamune reflects that the reason for the summons must be something much more serious than his behavior in class. The teacher walks down the hallway followed by Masamune, while Sakura watches the curious scene. The girl stands in the hallway, worried about her classmate's fate. The teacher opens the door to the principal's office, letting Masamune enter. Inside the room, Masamune finds 3 men sitting on a sofa, awaiting his arrival. A middle-aged man stares at him seriously and calls him by name. The young man goes into shock upon recognizing that that man is his father. He remembers that, back in junior high, his father was still alive. The young man observes his father's face with a mixture of nostalgia and confusion. One of the bullies, with a bandaged arm, points to Masamune and accuses him of having caused his injury. The aggressor, enraged, demands that the young man be punished for the aggression. The man accompanying him introduces himself calmly as Yuzo Harakawa, Nobusuke's father. Masamune recognizes the name and realizes the seriousness of the political situation involved. He recalls that Nobusuke's father was a very influential and dangerous local politician. Yuzo states that his son made a mistake, but questions if the fight was really started by Masamune. The young man denies it, maintaining his version that he only defended himself and that the other person hurt themselves. Nobusuke screams, calling the young man a liar and claiming to be the victim in the story. Another injured student stands up, offering to testify against Masamune. The accomplice points to the young man, accusing him aggressively of having beaten them up. Masamune remains indifferent to the false accusations, maintaining his closed-off posture. The principal, sweating coldly and terrified, apologizes to the politician and promises to expel the student immediately. Masamune's father reacts with surprise to the principal's severe proposal. Yuzo interrupts, suggesting that, since it is his first offense, maybe he does not need such a drastic punishment. The politician sketches a fake smile, articulating a humiliating plan. He proposes, with a tone of superiority, that Masamune kneel and ask for forgiveness. Yuzo feigns benevolence, saying it is just a fight between children and that he does not want the expulsion. Masamune's father observes the scene, clearly uncomfortable with the demand made of his son. The politician continues with his sadistic speech, saying that it is the duty of adults to teach the harshness of real life. With an arrogant gesture, Yuzo orders the young man to kneel before them. The principal and the teacher exchange a knowing look, laughing at the humiliating situation. Nobusuke and his accomplices display smiles of victory, awaiting Masamune's submission. Masamune raises his hand, containing the humiliation ordered by the influential politician. His father, sensing the tension, places himself in front of the young man to protect him at that critical moment. Masamune's father asks seriously if it is true that his son did not react physically to the aggressions. The young man responds with firmness and coldness that he did not fight back against the attacks. The father hears the confirmation and demonstrates that he understands exactly what is happening. He kneels before the authorities, adopting a submissive and strategic posture. Masamune observes his father's hands resting on the floor with a feeling of anguish. The father bows completely in an apology, while those present observe the humiliating act. The principal and the teacher seem uncomfortable with the scene, while Yuzo Hirakawa maintains his superior posture. Masamune stares at the scene with a look full of resentment and determination. The father asks for forgiveness for the trouble caused by his son, keeping his head low before the politician. Nobusuke, feeling victorious, displays a sadistic smile upon seeing the submission of the Corona family. Yuzo, satisfied, praises the father's sensible stance, criticizing the stubbornness of other businessmen. The politician mentions the karate dojo that Masamune's father manages as a hobby, Yuzo offers to expand Masamune's business, maintaining the tone of one who holds all the cards. He promises to get a privileged piece of land near the station, sealing the corrupt bargain. Nobusuke observes the scene with arrogant disdain. Knowing he has humiliated his target, Masamune looks away, feeling deep hatred bubble up inside him. The dry sound of the door closing marks the end of that shameful meeting. Masamune realizes that his father has already left the room after the agreement. He sees his father's knees, still marked by the position of submission on the floor. The father smiles at his son, proud of how he followed his teachings of patience. Masamune responds dryly that, obviously, he followed what was taught. Sakura, hidden in the hallway, observes the scene, feeling distressed and worried about her classmate. She wonders with a lump in her throat if Masamune will be okay after so much humiliation. The door closes, separating Masamune from the girl's sight. Nobusuke comments to his father how pathetic the scene was, laughing at the weakness shown. The bully plays with his bandages, finding it funny how they managed to lie and get away with it. Yuzo reprimands his son, reminding him that there are people who need to crawl to survive. Nobusuke laughs loudly, ensuring he will never have a destination as miserable as that of the young man he just subjugated. Sakura, hearing the conversation, widens her eyes upon realizing the cruelty of the bullies. Nobusuke turns and notices the presence of Sakura peeking through the hallway. The girl is startled and retreats quickly so as not to be seen. The bully stares at the spot where she was, recognizing Sakura Shiraishi. Elsewhere, Masamune clenches his fist, swearing that he will make those who humiliated him understand their place. Night falls over the city, where the bullies gather to celebrate their evil deeds. Nobusuke and his friends are in a Karek room, acting with total contempt for others. He throws his bag on the table and orders his accomplices to prepare something potent. The young man demands the strongest substance available for that night's fun. One of the accomplices asks, with astonishment, if they intend to sedate someone as big as a bear. Nobusuke lights a cigarette and confirms coldly that the target is a girl. He releases a puff of smoke with a devilish smile on his face. Masamune, somewhere, reflects on how he will make his enemies pay for their arrogance. Sakura, oblivious to the danger, studies at home while being mentally watched by the bully's malice. The school bell rings, signaling the end of classes, and a soft voice calls out to Corona-kun, drawing his attention. Shiraishi approaches, worried, and asks if everything went well after they called him to the principal's office. He replies that everything is fine and that she doesn't need to worry about it, leaving the girl a little suspicious. Shiraishi wonders if he's really okay since another student was expelled in the past because of Hirakawa. Somehow the girl feels something different when she looks at the boy as they walk side by side. She notices that Corona's demeanor has completely changed, and he seems much more mature than before. Reaching a corner, she says goodbye, stating that she will continue down that path from there on. The young woman waves cheerfully, wishing they would see each other the next day with a smile on her face. Corona simply watches the girl walk away in silence as she continues on her way home. The boy becomes thoughtful, maintaining a serious and focused look on what he needs to do from now on. He remembers that before going back in time, he had never seen Shiraishi make such a worried expression. The sunset colors the sky with reddish hues, revealing the facade of the family's traditional dojo. Inside the room, Masamune is kneeling before his father, who is calling to him in a firm and serious manner. The man asks his son directly if he really didn't lay a hand on any of those boys. The young man reflects that he spent his life following the teaching of never using violence, even when he became a mercenary. Faced with this, he wonders if obeying orders without questioning was really the right choice for his life. But even with all the doubts, he decides that he doesn't want to act against his family's teachings. He reaffirms to his father that the bully only tried to land a blow and ended up hurting himself. The father questions the reason for the aggression, and the boy calmly replies that there was no real reason for it. The man listens to the explanation with a worried expression and simply says that he understands his son's situation. He recalls the golden rule of never raising a hand against ordinary people, and the young man agrees with the lesson. The father claps his hands forcefully, making a dry sound to end end the matter once and for all. Satisfied with the answers, he declares the problem solved while his son listens in silence. Immediately afterwards, the father pulls a rope and lifts the decorative panel that was hanging on the wall. With a discreet smile on his face, he reveals a secret passage hidden just behind the fabric. The man announces that it's time to begin the day's training. As the boy enters the secret room, the compartment reveals an impressive arsenal filled with firearms and swords hanging on the walls. There are also old photos of military combatants showing the true story behind that place. The father cracks his fists with a challenging smile and asks if the young man is ready for today's training. Masamune assumes a firm fighting stance and confirms that he is ready to begin the confrontation. The two position themselves facing each other in the center of the secret room, ready to begin the training session. The next day, the school routine resumes with the sun shining brightly over the school building. Masamune walks down the hallway deep in thought, knowing full well that Nobusu Kirikawa won't let this go easily. Not knowing what the bully might try to do to him, the boy decides that the best thing to do is to be on full alert. Shiraishi appears cheerfully and greets him, wishing him a good day. Receiving a calm reply from Corona, the young man asks her directly if she noticed anything out of the ordinary, leaving the girl confused by the question. She makes a thoughtful expression and replies that she believes nothing strange happened there. Upon hearing the response, the boy says that everything is fine and ends the conversation in a calm and straightforward manner. The class begins normally with all students seated at their respective desks, paying attention. However, the girl begins to tremble slightly as she feels an unusual agitation in her chest. With flushed cheeks, she tries to understand her heart's reaction to what has just happened. She wonders what he meant by that question and casts a discreet glance in the boy's direction. The young woman becomes thoughtful and begins to consider the possibility that Corona might actually be worried about her. Corona silently reflects that getting involved with him could put Shiraishi in the crosshairs of dangerous people. The boy knows he needs sources of information and therefore intends to continue monitoring the situation through them. He doesn't mind being the target, but warns himself that dragging his family and friends into it will cross the line. Night has already fallen on the city when Sakura says goodbye to a friend on the street before heading home. She walks alone along the illuminated sidewalk, paying full attention to the screen of her cell phone. Suddenly, large metal structures plummet from the sky at high speed towards the sidewalk. The girl looks up in complete shock as she realizes the imminent danger falling right on top of her. In the dark alley, Sakura notices someone hooded and lying under several wooden planks and cautiously approaches. The man with his face covered screams desperately for help, trying to get the young student's attention. Without hesitation, the girl runs towards the stranger, asking if he is all right and if he needs medical help. She kneels beside the injured boy to help him, unaware that she is being watched from a distance. Beneath the shadows of the hood, the man reveals an extremely malicious smile, showing that it was all a trap. Suddenly, a huge man appears behind Sakura and immobilizes her by violently covering her mouth. The girl becomes desperate and tries to scream for help while hearing the cruel laughter of the aggressors around her. The hooded boy gets up without any difficulty, throwing the piece of wood aside and revealing that he was not hurt. Hirakawa appears with a sadistic expression, mocking the innocence of the girl who easily fell for the group's trick. Meanwhile, Masamune runs hurriedly through the night, following a route after receiving a notification on his cell phone. He wipes the sweat from his face with a towel and scans the messages with a visibly worried expression. The screen on your device shows that the sender of this whole situation is none other than the troublesome Hirakawa. The phone beeps and the young man's eyes widen as he is confronted with a shocking image. The file sent shows Sakura gagged and held hostage, accompanied by an order for him to go to the indicated location. The boy watches the glow of the cell phone with frightening seriousness as he plans what he will do next. He reflects that the bully's reaction was much faster than he originally imagined. In a luxurious building in the city, one of the criminals celebrates, saying that the target didn't suspect a thing. They laugh loudly inside the Carrick room, commenting on how the young woman fell for the cheap chariot of the cry for help. In the corner of the room, tied up and gagged, Sakura cries softly while listening to the cruel jokes of the criminals. One of the boys shows impatience and asks if they can't start acting soon with girl being held hostage. Hirakawa denies this and claims she wants to do everything in front of Masamune so that he can see her scream and beg for her life. The leader wields a huge combat knife, displaying it intimidatingly before Sakura's terrified eyes. The girl trembles with fear, tears streaming down her face as she stares at the sharp blade pressed close to her. The weapon reflects the ambient lighting, highlighting the real danger that the situation represents for the young woman. One of the girls present comments that the group's attitude is cold and asks who the boy who is about to arrive is. An accomplice explains that he is the son of the owner of the Karadogo and mocks him, saying that he can't hit ordinary people. She says that doing all this to someone harmless is ridiculous, irritating Hirakawa, who yells at her to shut up. Suddenly, the door to the room is kicked open violently, startling everyone present. The entire group instantly falls silent and turns with wide eyes towards the intruder. Hirakawa's expression changes to a psychotic grin as he realizes his guest of honor has finally arrived. Masamune appears standing in the doorway of the room, with clenched fists and an imposing posture that radiates pure fury. Sakura cries with relief and tries to call the boy's name with her voice muffled by the duct tape gag. The young man stares coldly at the leader of the delinquents and asks what he thinks he's doing there. Hirakawa points to himself with extreme arrogance, mocking the obvious question asked by his opponent. The other gang members stand up smiling and warn that they will beat him until he can no longer move. The boy proposes a deal, asking if they will release the girl if he agrees to be beaten without fighting back. One of Hirakawa's accomplices reacts with surprise and disdain to the young intruder's unexpected proposal. Hirakawa laughs at the idea and says that obviously he won't release her and that he'll have to watch everything. The leader of the bullies lunges forward, throwing a punch with all his might, shouting that he will destroy the hostage in front of him. Masamune remains completely still, maintaining his icy expression even as the blow comes his way. He calmly closes his eyes for a brief second, taking in the whole situation and the wickedness of those boys. At that moment, his father's peaceful teachings and the rule of not attacking ordinary people came to his mind. The young man reflects that in the past he only used violence in wars, but the presence of an innocent hostage changes everything. His eyes gleam intensely as he realizes that this dangerous scenario is no different from a real battlefield. With absurd reflexes, he dodges and delivers a devastating punch directly to the arrogant leader's face. The brutal impact throws Hirakawa's body backward, causing him to flip over the table and terrifying his accomplices. The leader of the delinquents screams in pain as blood pours from his nose and mouth due to the violence of the blow. The henchmen beside him watch the scene, paralyzed with terror, unable to believe the boy's frightening strength. The rest of the gang starts to sweat, realizing too late that they messed with the wrong person that night. The young women who were with the group are completely horrified by the violent turn of events at the karaoke bar. Seeing the violence of the attack, the two girls who were with the gang flee desperately from the karaoke room. The delinquents panic, arguing about whether the young man really shouldn't be beating up ordinary people for doing karat. Masamune remains standing in the center of the room, surrounded by an intimidating aura, ready for his next move. He knows that the criminals believe that the presence of a hostage would prevent him from acting freely at that moment. The boy concludes that if he doesn't give the enemies any opening to act, the hostage situation simply ceases to exist. With a calm and unwavering expression, he makes a hand gesture, challenging his opponents to immediate combat. One of the delinquents charges forward furiously, shouting loudly and throwing a punch with all his might towards Masamune. Masamune dodges with extreme ease and counters with a precise punch that brutally knocks down the attacker. The impact is so strong that it causes the aggressor's body to collide with his own companion, who was right behind him. The young man moves quickly, dodging a bottle and delivering a precise blow that knocks out another accomplice. Immediately afterwards, he grabs the last aggressor by the collar with an intimidating look that paralyzes his opponent with fear. With a swift and merciless movement, he throws the boy against the wall, ending the fight in a few seconds. The last subordinate remaining on his feet observes the destruction around him, completely trembling and without reaction in the face of the young man. The criminal swallows hard, realizing the terrible situation he's gotten himself into by challenging a monster like that. He glances to the side and notices Hirakawa's combat knife, which was lying abandoned on the karaoke table. Desperate, he lunges to grab the weapon and makes a move to run towards Sakura to use her as a human shield. Sakura's eyes widen in panic as Masamune propels himself forward at an unbelievable speed. Before the aggressor can touch the girl, the young man delivers a brutal flying kick that hits him squarely in the head. The impact throws the offender against the furniture, instantly knocking him unconscious and causing the knife to fall from his hands. The boy falls unconscious right next to Sakura, who watches the whole scene completely stunned and in silence. Masamune calmly walks back through the room until he reaches the gang leader, who is still trying to recover. Hirakawa is lying on the ground with a bleeding face and an expression of pure panic at the protagonist's approach. The boy stands imposingly, staring down at the defeated bully with a cold, menacing look. The villain starts screaming desperately, threatening Masamune and his father if he dares to touch him again. In response, Masamune simply pulls out his cell phone and shows the screen to his opponent with a slightly mocking tone. Hirakawa is in complete shock and asks where the boy got the information that's on that device. The photo on the screen reveals the bully consuming alcohol and smoking cigarettes while underage, along with his partners. The protagonist warns that he has gathered enough evidence of his illegal activities that would destroy his reputation if leaked. He turns his back on the enemy, stating that none of this really matters as long as he learns the lesson once and for all. The young man approaches Sakura and very carefully removes the adhesive tape gag that covered the girl's mouth. She looks at him with teary eyes and murmurs his name, feeling immense gratitude for having been saved there. Suddenly, she lets out a little scream of surprise and embarrassment as she is unexpectedly lifted up by the boy. Masamune carries her on his shoulders with complete ease and warns the delinquents that he doesn't want to ruin their lives in court. He calmly walks towards the exit of the karaoke room, keeping the young woman safe and comfortable on his back. The young man throws one last grim warning over his shoulder, making it clear what will happen if they bother them again. He swears that next time none of them will leave there in one piece, and the trembling bully accepts the threat without hesitation. Once outside and safe, Sakura sincerely thanks the boy for appearing to save her from that predicament. The young man responds coldly, saying that he only acted out of self-interest to make his own school life easier. Sakura smiles sweetly, deciding to accept the boy's apology, even though she knows he truly cares about her. Night falls silently through the city's streets as new alliances begin to form in the shadows. Elsewhere, Hirakawa runs up the outside stairs of a building, crying and complaining about his bad luck. He violently opens the door of a hideout, displaying his bruised and hate-filled face to his partners. The boy enters a room full of older delinquents who seem far more dangerous and experienced than his gang. The leader with the colorful hair greets him with a sarcastic smile, asking how the plan they had devised went. Downcast and trembling, Hirakawa confesses in a frustrated tone that he has failed miserably in the mission given to him. The other members of the group stare at him with disdain as they listen to the young rookie's account of his humiliating defeat. The leader slowly gets up from the sofa, displaying a menacing posture that further increases the tension in the room. He walks up to the boy and coldly concludes that he was unable to bring young Sakura Shirashi as planned. The group leader brings his face close to Hirakawa's, smiling mockingly and reminding him that he is just a school child. Humiliated and furious, Hirakawa swallows his pride in silence as anger boils inside his chest because of Masamune. The red-haired leader laughs diabolically and warns that Hirakawa is completely mistaken about the boy. Without any warning, the boss delivers a brutal blow to Hirakawa's face, causing him to spit saliva from the force of the impact. Hirakawa falls to the ground trembling and terrified as blood streams from his face after his leader's unexpected attack. The red-haired boss mocks him, saying that anyone who relies on family connections is second-rate. The fearsome Kudom Retsu demands to know the name of the boy who did this, vowing to resolve the entire situation with violence. The following day at the Corona family dojo, training continues intensely with Masamune and his father facing off seriously. The boy's father firmly grips a wooden sword and announces that it's time to begin another round of combat. Masamune readily agrees, maintaining his focused posture and demonstrating complete respect for his master's teachings. The man brings his wooden sword down with extreme speed, delivering a powerful downward attack against his son. The two exchange swift blows in the center of the dojo, the attacks of their wooden swords echoing loudly through the hall. With an extremely agile movement, Masamune manages to dodge the blow and destabilize his father's fighting stance. The father recovers and praises the boy's performance, commenting that his movements have improved impressively. He notes that in recent days his son seems to act and move as if he were a completely different and more experienced person. However, the man points out a crucial detail, saying that Masamune still shows hesitation during the execution of the blows. The young man lowers his head, silently thinking about how extremely perceptive and attentive to the smallest details his father is. Masamune realizes that his father can read his heart through his movements and remembers when he broke the rules to save Shiraishi. He reflects that if he hadn't used physical force the previous night, the girl would certainly have suffered something much worse. The boy stares at his own palm, reflecting deeply on the responsibility of wielding that combat power. He wonders what the point would be of training exhaustively every day if he could never use his art in combat. The father stares at him with a deep, very serious look, as if he knows exactly what's going through his son's head. Holding the wooden sword firmly, he gives the young man direct advice, ordering him never to hesitate in combat. He partially pulls out a sharp metal blade, revealing that there is something much more serious behind that training in the dojo. The man sternly warns his son, saying that any sign of hesitation at the crucial moment could end up costing him his life. He performs a quick and precise movement, cutting the air with his real sword to demonstrate the lethality of his technique. The blade gleams intensely, stopping millimeters from the target, demonstrating the absurd precision the master possesses with the weapon. Even with the sword's edge pressed against his neck, Masamune shows not a hint of fear and remains completely still. The father solemnly explains that the martial art inherited through generations in the family is in fact a purely lethal technique. He reveals that the style was created to help a soldier survive on real battlefields by dominating all enemies. The master concludes by saying that the training has not yet yielded complete results, but assures that one day the young man will understand all of this. Masamune listens silently, processing his father's words, while reflecting on the destiny that awaits him in the future. In his memories of a past life, he recalls crossing burning battlefields, thinking that he never truly understood it. The blade reflects a bluish and mystical glow, symbolizing the weight of destiny and violence that surround the protagonist's life. Still, the young man questions whether he should really continue blindly obeying this rigid family teaching. His feet move swiftly across the mat as he continues sparring with his father, seeking to perfect his technique. He accepts the training, responding respectfully and ending the session under the watchful and stern gaze of his father. The next day, the nostalgic routine of going to school to train and returning to classes repeats itself, just like in his old days. Near the lockers, Sakura calls him excitedly, and the young man calmly turns to respond to her greeting. Visibly embarrassed, the girl gathers her courage and asks if he happens to have any free time after today's classes. Masamune responds directly that he doesn't have free time, leaving the girl completely shocked and speechless by the refusal. She explains she only wanted to formally thank him for the rescue at the Karak Bar, but the young man tells her not to worry about it. indignant at her colleague's coldness. She exclaims forcefully, saying that what he did the other day was no small thing. The girl's scream draws the attention of several students who were nearby and watched the scene with great curiosity. Determined, Sakura steps forward and corners the boy against the lockers, insisting they need to talk things over. Taken aback by his colleague's unusual boldness, the protagonist sighs and ends up accepting her invitation. The boy suggests they leave immediately, and the young woman blushes deeply and becomes extremely shy when she realizes what she has just done. Shortly after, the scene changes to the charming facade of a quiet coffee shop where they decide to meet. Sitting face to face at a table near the window, the girl thoughtfully examines the menu, unsure of what to choose. Masamune orders only a pure black coffee, surprising the girl because he already consumes such a strong and bitter drink. She asks if he usually goes to places like this often, and the young man reveals that it's actually his first time there. The girl comments that she found that curious, since he seems extremely calm and accustomed to that elegant environment. The red-haired leader laughs diabolically and warns that Hirakawa is completely mistaken about the boy. Without any warning, the boss delivers a brutal blow to Hirakawa's face, causing him to spit saliva from the force of the impact. Hirakawa falls to the ground trembling and terrified as blood streams from his face after his leader's unexpected attack. The red-haired boss mocks him, saying that anyone who relies on family connections is second-rate. The fearsome Kudome Retsu demands to know the name of the boy who did this, vowing to resolve the entire situation with violence. The following day at the Corona family dojo, training continues intensely with Masamune and his father facing off seriously. The boy's father firmly grips a wooden sword and announces that it's time to begin another round of combat. Masamune readily agrees, maintaining his focused posture and demonstrating complete respect for his master's teachings. The man brings down his wooden sword with extreme speed, delivering a powerful downward attack against his son. The two exchange swift blows in the center of the dojo, the attacks of their wooden swords echoing loudly through the hall. With an extremely agile movement, Masamune manages to dodge the blow and destabilize his father's fighting stance. The father recovers and praises the boy's performance, commenting that his movements have improved impressively. He notes that in recent days his son seems to act and move as if he were a completely different and more experienced person. However, the man points out a crucial detail, saying that Masamune still shows hesitation during the execution of the blows. The young man lowers his head, silently thinking about how extremely perceptive and attentive to the smallest details his father is. Masamune realizes that his father can read his heart through his movements and remembers when he broke the rules to save Shiraishi. He reflects that if he hadn't used physical force the previous night, the girl would certainly have suffered something much worse. The boy stares at his own palm, reflecting deeply on the responsibility of wielding that combat power. He wonders what the point would be of training exhaustively every day if he could never use his art in combat. The father stares at him with a deep, very serious look, as if he knows exactly what's going through his son's head. Holding the wooden sword firmly, he gives the young man direct advice, ordering him never to hesitate in combat. He partially pulls out a sharp metal blade, revealing that there is something much more serious behind that training in the dojo. The man sternly warns his son, saying that any sign of hesitation at the crucial moment could end up costing him his life. He performs a quick and precise movement, cutting the air with his real sword to demonstrate the lethality of his technique. The blade gleams intensely, stopping millimeters from the target, demonstrating the absurd precision the master possesses with the weapon. Even with the sword's edge pressed against his neck, Masamune shows not a hint of fear and remains completely still. The father solemnly explains that the martial art inherited through generations and in the family is in fact a purely lethal technique. He reveals that the style was created to help a soldier survive on real battlefields by dominating all enemies. The master concludes by saying that the training has not yet yielded complete results, but assures that one day the young man will understand all of this. Masamune listens silently, processing his father's words while reflecting on the destiny that awaits him in the future. In his memories of a past life, he recalls crossing burning battlefields, thinking that he never truly understood it. The blade reflects a bluish and mystical glow, symbolizing the weight of destiny and the violence that surround the protagonist's life. Still, the young man questions whether he should really continue blindly obeying this rigid family teaching. His feet move swiftly across the mat as he continues sparring with his father, seeking to perfect his technique. He accepts the training, responding respectfully and ending the session under the watchful and stern gaze of his father. The next day, the nostalgic routine of going to school to train and returning to classes repeats itself, just like in his old days. Near the lockers, Sakura calls him excitedly, and the young man calmly turns to respond to her greeting, visibly embarrassed. The girl gathers her courage and asks if he happens to have any free time after today's classes. Masamune responds directly that he doesn't have free time, leaving the girl completely shocked and speechless by the refusal. She explains that she only wanted to formally thank him for the rescue at the karaoke bar, but the young man tells her not to worry about it. Indignant at her colleague's coldness, she exclaims forcefully, saying that what he did the other day was no small thing. The girl's scream draws the attention of several students who are nearby and watch the scene with great curiosity. Determined, Sakura steps forward and corners the boy against the lockers, insisting they need to talk things over. Taken aback by his colleague's unusual boldness, the protagonist sighs and ends up accepting her invitation. The boy suggests they leave immediately, and the young woman blushes deeply and becomes extremely shy when she realizes what she has just done. Shortly after, the scene changes to the charming facade of a quiet coffee shop, where they decide to meet. Sitting face to face at a table near the window, the girl thoughtfully examines the menu, unsure of what to choose. Masamune orders only a pure black coffee, surprising the girl because he already consumes such a strong and bitter drink. She asks if he usually goes to places like this often, and the young man reveals that it's actually his first time there. The girl comments that she found that curious, since he seems extremely calm and accustomed to that elegant environment. Retsu walks right past the boys, who remain hunched over and sweating profusely as they frantically wish each other a good morning. The red-haired delinquent spots Sakura in the hallway and greets her with feigned friendliness, calling her Sakura-chan. Sakura is slightly startled and responds to the greeting hesitantly, trying to hide her great nervousness. Retsu approaches, invading her personal space, and asks if the girl is free after school today. Upon hearing that she is already in a relationship, he pretends to accept it calmly, saying that there is nothing he can do about it. Despite the peaceful response, the student remains extremely suspicious and feels that there is something wrong with that boy. Sakura watches the new student walk away down the hallway and wonders why he insists so much on talking to her. Later in the classroom, the teacher distributes activity sheets and instructs the class to pass the papers to the back of the class. Masamune waits patiently at his desk, extending his hand to receive his worksheet from the classmate in front of him. However, the colleague passes the sheet directly to the student behind him, completely ignoring the protagonist in the process. The boy is intrigued and wonders if he was intentionally skipped during the distribution of school supplies that day. He notices that the colleagues around him are extremely shaky and avoid looking at him for fear of the new bully. The bell rings announcing the end of the school day, and the students begin to organize their desks to go home. Masamune notices something is wrong when he looks at his own desk, which is completely empty without the activity sheets. Protagonist realizes that only his wallet and those of a few other students were left without receiving the day's materials. He notices that one of the students responsible for cleaning the room is being watched by a delinquent with a menacing look. The delinquents grin maliciously, surrounding the defenseless classmate with the wooden stick in hand. Masamune observes all the suspicious movement from a distance, realizing the beginning of yet another cowardly attack in the classroom. Without any mercy, the bully strikes his classmate from behind with the broom handle, causing the boy to scream in pain. The assaulted student falls to the ground between the desks, while the aggressors continue to surround him in a threatening manner. The aggressor mocks the situation, ironically saying that the tables and chairs simply fell over on their own. He mercilessly steps on the fallen boy's back, feigning surprise and maliciously asking if he stepped on something. The humiliation continues in front of the entire class, on the watchful and analytical gaze of the protagonist, who remains motionless. Masamune analyzes the power dynamics that form there, identifying who the real players behind all this oppression are. The delinquents continue their tyranny by humiliating another boy, rubbing an eraser in his face while laughing. The protagonist's eyes narrow as he processes the terrible actions committed by that group without any punishment. Rakawa watches everything from his seat at the teacher's desk, a victorious smile on his face as he stares directly at Masamune from there. The boy finally understands the entire strategy devised by his rival to isolate him and make him suffer psychologically. Hirakawa scoffs at how long it took him to notice and boasts that this time he himself didn't lay a hand on anyone. He knows that by acting behind the scenes, no school authority or correct rule can legally touch him. The villain knows that Kudome created that hell, and that as long as he rules the class, anyone who suffers there will be ignored. The delinquent's clear intention is to make Masamune suffer as much as possible in silence inside that classroom. A student tries to run towards the exit, but is stopped by a cowardly trip from one of the bullies, who laughs at the fall. The boy is thrown to the ground, while the delinquent broom cynically comments that the atmosphere there has become somewhat tense. Masamune reflects that his future self never hesitated to act again, while the self that followed his father's rules ended up dying. The boy mentally apologizes to his father, admitting that he no longer knows what the right thing to do is in that situation. However, the memory of Sakura smiling and saying that she only does what she wants to do echoes in Masamune's mind. The aggressor raises the broom, ready to deliver another painful blow to his fallen colleague, testing the protagonist's patience. With a swift movement, Masamune blocks the attack using his own broom, generating a loud, cracking sound in the air. The bully's eyes widen in shock as he watches his broom, instantly disarmed by the boy's incredible strength. Masamune's gaze blazes intensely with anger, mentally decreeing that there will be no more hesitation in him. With perfect martial technique, he spins the wooden handle and strikes the top of the attacker's head with extreme force. The offender grinds his teeth in pain, feeling the devastating impact of the blow that causes him to completely lose consciousness. The boy collapses unconscious on the hallway floor, leaving the other henchmen in total shock at the hero's aggressive reaction. Another member of the gang takes advantage of the distraction and runs behind the protagonist, raising his broomstick to attack. Without even looking back, the young man blocks the blow with surgical precision and disarms his new opponent with extreme ease. The attacker spits saliva with the force of a swift counterattack that strikes his vital area with the precision of a real combatant. From above, we see Masamune standing over the fallen delinquents while Hirakawa begins to back away, trembling and frightened, across the room. Gritting his teeth in pure hatred and terror, the villain stares at the protagonist, unable to accept that his plan has failed once again. Masamune simply extends his hand calmly and says that he likes to keep the classroom very clean and organized. Masamune examines the fallen delinquents and coldly comments that there seem to be some large trash scattered around the room. He reaffirms, with his back to Hirakawa, that he simply likes to keep the classroom properly clean and organized. The boy stares at his colleague with a merciless look, repeating the taunt about cleaning up the trash that is bothering others. Hirakawa grits his teeth in pure terror and hatred, realizing he has no chance against the boy's absurd strength. Without thinking twice, the villain turns around and runs desperately down the school hallway to save his skin. He panicked and wondered what was happening, realizing that if things continued like this, his gang would be wiped out for good. Masamune merely watches his opponent cowardly flee down the corridor without showing the slightest interest in pursuing him. He ponders for a moment whether he should have chased after him, but decides that focusing on his own progress is better. The saved classmate approaches, trembling, and asks if Masamune truly understands the gravity of what he has just done. The young man explains, frightened, that fighting back against dangerous bullies of that caliber will only bring even worse consequences. He warns that the gang of delinquents will certainly return much stronger and more aggressive to take revenge on the protagonist. The hero listens apathetically to the warning and calmly questions whether the situation really works that way. Noticing the protagonist's icy stare, the two fallen delinquents leap up and flee, screaming in terror. Masamune claims that all he has to do is keep hitting them until they give up, but his colleague desperately says that Kodome is too dangerous. Crying with fear, the boy explains that the new headmaster of the school has an army of delinquents like Hirakawa under his command. The other students who watched the scene from afar shared the same feeling of despair and utter hopelessness. Because of the cruel system imposed by Retsu, no student there has the courage to ally with or help their needy classmates. The young man breaks down, stating that it is simply impossible for them to fight alone against all that oppression from the group. The protagonist merely observes his colleague's lament, maintaining a thoughtful and icy expression in the face of all that pain. Turning his back, the boy asks what he prefers to do, silently accept being erased by them or truly react. He guides his colleague to choose his own path, while tidying his desk, making it clear that he will act purely in his own way. The protagonist firmly declares that numbers don't matter to him, and that he will continue fighting until he defeats the last enemy. The following day, the routine at school resumes under an atmosphere of extreme tension that silently hangs in the hallways. Sakura carefully descends the school stairs, paying close attention to all the activity around her that day. Retsu walks calmly down the hallway while the other students continue to bow in terror before him. Hidden behind a wall, Sakura watches the villain receive the frightened greetings of other boys at the school. Retsu approaches a boy and orders him to buy him a drink, receiving an immediate and submissive response from the student. With a mocking and superior tone, the leader of the delinquents demands that the boy buy exactly 10 bottles of soda. The student becomes desperate and stammers, not knowing how he will manage to carry and pay for so many drinks at once. Retsu stares at him menacingly, asking if there's a problem, and the boy immediately gives in, saying he'll run to get them. The villain smiles contentedly, saying he's counting on him, while Sakura continues to spy on the entire interaction from her heady out. He nods calmly as the boy runs desperately down the hallway to fulfill the absurd order as quickly as possible. Retsu turns slowly, keeping his hands in his pockets and adopting an extremely self-confident posture that intimidates passers-by. Sakura's eyes widen as she realizes the villain has changed direction and is about to notice her presence on the corner. Panicked upon noticing him walking towards her, the girl tries to move quickly to find a safe place. She runs towards the staircase knowing she needs to hide immediately so she doesn't get caught spying on the delinquent. Retsu reaches the top of the stairs and looks around suspiciously, sensing that someone had been there moments before. Crouching and holding her breath behind a pillar, Sakura manages to hide, just in time to avoid being seen by the leader. Noticing that he had walked away, she sighed with relief and concluded that the guy was bizarre, deciding to take another route. As she turns around, she spots the same student from before standing in front of a large vending machine in the hallway. The boy cries in despair as he opens his empty wallet, wondering why he has to go through this humiliation. Suddenly, one hand extends the necessary money, while another uses a cell phone to hack into the vending machine's system. The machine's display starts flashing absurd values, leaving the boy completely shocked and confused about what is happening. The boy kneels down excitedly as he watches the 10 cans fall all at once, unaware of his savior's presence right beside him. Holding the drinks, he cheerfully thanks the dark-haired boy who simply begins to walk away in silence. The mysterious boy tells him not to worry and casually reveals that he only slightly bypassed the machine's system. Sakura observes the savior from afar and feels a strong sense of familiarity, thinking she has seen him somewhere before. Meanwhile, Retsu stands in front of the school's multipurpose room, displaying a confident and mysterious smile on his face. Inside the location, Hirakawa waited anxiously and complained that the leader had taken too long to appear at that secret meeting. Retsu enters asking the reason for the summons, and Hirakawa angrily demands that he eliminate Masamune from there as quickly as possible. Retsu yawns, bored with the subject, and says he doesn't care about a coward who doesn't even know how to throw a proper punch. Hirakawa insists, terrified, remembering that Masamune defeated his entire gang the previous day and fears he will be the next victim. The leader coldly warns Hirakawa that his problems with the hero are not his concern and tells him to resolve them on his own. Hirakawa grits his teeth in pure frustration as he watches the red-haired leader walk away with utter disdain. A tear of hatred runs down the face of the defeated boy, who feels completely abandoned and without options there. Trying to retain the boss's attention, Hirakawa cleverly mentions Sakura Shirishi's name before he leaves the room. Upon hearing that name, the delinquent leader immediately stops in his tracks and casts a look of pure surprise back. Sensing the opening, Hirakawa smiles maliciously and says he knows exactly how to make the girl who avoids him like him. In the blink of an eye, Retsu lunges forward violently and grabs the boy's collar, pinning him with extreme fury and hostility. Staring at him in an intimidating manner, the boss orders him in a threatening voice not to go around making up nonsense. Hirakawa maintains his forced smile even though it's choking him, and questions whether the leader doesn't really want to know how to win his love. The red-haired delinquent grimaces in displeasure, but can't hide that the subject interests him. Releasing his accomplice's collar, he straightens up roughly and orders the boy to just say what his plan is. Hirakawa adjusts his shirt in relief and begins to explain that nowadays no sensible girl is attracted to brute force. He argues that ruling the school through fear won't make Sakura find him a genuinely nice or attractive guy. The villain adds that the young woman clearly likes Masamune and that Retsu's reign of terror will only distance her further from him. He warns that the more aggressive his dominance becomes, the more Sakura will seek Masamune's protection, bringing the two closer together. Impatient with the long speech, the boss abruptly interrupts him and tells him to just say what needs to be done in practice. Hirakawa approaches the blackboard, assuming a strategist's stance, and states that they need to focus on two objectives. Using chalk, he writes on the green blackboard, indicating that the first goal is to ban Masamune from that school permanently, and the second objective of the sordid plan is to make Retsu finally abandon that ridiculous act of being a good guy in front of Sakura. He darkly suggests that if the girl is never going to like him willingly, then they should just force a relationship. Retsu sighs, processing the idea, and seems to agree with the perverse logic presented by his accomplice. The leader approaches the blackboard, observing the final details of the evil plan devised by his cunning subordinate. With an extremely powerful and rage-filled punch, he destroys the blackboard in one blow, demonstrating his enormous physical strength. He declares in a somber tone that he accepts being part of that plan, and that their first step will be to crush Masamune. A terrifying and maniacal smile takes over Retsu as he savors the idea of destroying his new rival in every way possible. The villain vows to annihilate the boy physically and socially, ensuring he will never be able to recover in life. The boss reaffirms that he will destroy the hero for playing according to the rules laid out by Hirakawa in that room. Hirakawa grins sadistically and victoriously, believing he has finally found the ideal weapon to get revenge on Masamune. But then Retsu changes the subject and warns that Hirakawa will have to pay for everything, leaving him surprised and confused. He reveals that he heard rumors about a brilliant hacker in high school and decides that their plan will begin by hiring this guy. The cell phone screen glows, revealing the code name of the mysterious hacker who goes by the nickname Nighthawk on the internet. Hirakawa acknowledges the hacker's reputation and considers that this individual is not the type who is only motivated by easy money. Retsu disregards the obstacles and orders his name to be used in the proposal, warning that if he refuses, he will be brought in by force. The bell rings announcing the end of the 6th period, and the students bow, formally thanking the class for ending. Masamune begins to put his school supplies in his backpack as Retsu walks past the corner of his desk on her way out. As the delinquent leader passes by, he casts a mocking smile in the hero's direction, savoring what he has planned against him. Masamune notices the subtle provocation and stares at his rival with an intrigued look, trying to decipher what he is plotting now. The two villains leave the classroom together under the watchful and analytical gaze of the hero, who remains motionless at his desk. He adjusts the strap of his backpack on his shoulder and finds it quite strange that they haven't tried anything hostile today. Dusk falls over the Corona residence, and the silence of the house is broken only by the announcement that the boy has arrived. Upon entering, the young man turns on the lights and notices that his father is still working in the company office. On the phone, the father apologizes, saying there will be no training today and that his mother will not be coming home anytime soon either. The man is shown at his workplace, surrounded by industrial equipment, while having a serious conversation with his son. Suspicious of the unusual tone of the conversation, Masamune asks his father directly if something serious has happened there. An employee runs desperately to his father, panicking and warning that the computer system crashed due to a hacker attack. Concerned about the crisis, the father quickly ends the call, promising to call back later, and the boy agrees to hang up. Staring at the dark screen of his cell phone, Masamune mentally repeats the word hacker, connecting the dots with what he heard. He stands in the center of the room with a serious expression, realizing that the retaliation from his enemies has already begun to affect his family. Suddenly, the living room television turns on by itself, and the distorted figure of the hacker, Nighthawk, appears on the screen calling for him. The protagonist is astonished to see the device turn on autonomously without anyone nearby to activate it. The hacker transmits a warning from the delinquent Kudome, ordering Masamune to leave that school and abandon the entire city. Masamune soon realizes that he was the target of a cyber-attack and that the attack on his father was only meant to hurt him indirectly. He silently wonders if that mysterious hacker was also responsible for hacking into his father's factory system. When questioned about the consequences, Nighthawk threatens to continue destroying and forcing the closure of the family business. The attacker completes the threat by promising to leak all of the company's industrial and confidential secrets to the public. The hero's gaze becomes extremely grim as he realizes that the enemy has crossed the red line by attacking the people he loves. Masamune realizes that Kudome's strategy isn't limited to the classroom, but extends to completely ruining his family life. The protagonist feigns disdain, responding firmly that it seems the enemy has run out of real combat options, and appeals. Nighthawk subtly hints that the ejection order is valid for tomorrow, leaving open what can be done today. The hacker reveals, in a surprising way, that Sakura Shirishi has not yet returned home, immediately triggering an alarm in the boy's mind. Masamune questions why he would give that information if he's working for Kudome, and the hacker says he doesn't care who wins. He explains, with his back to the screen, that cowardly attitude towards the girl simply wasn't part of the agreed-upon contract. The hacker cynically confesses that he finds it amusing to watch the desperation of a cornered prey deciding whether to fight or flee. The protagonist processes the information coldly and says that he perfectly understood the message given by the mysterious intruder. Before ending the transmission, the hacker asks to correct the boy about an incorrect assumption he made earlier. Without waiting for the conversation to end, Masamune begins to take firm steps towards his front door, determined to act that night. Holding the doorknob, the young man states with determination that the outcome of a real fight is never decided before the end. With a dry sound, he opens the front door, declaring that this is how real battlefields always work. However, upon exiting through the gate, he encounters 3 burly delinquents who are already waiting for him in the darkness of that street. The thugs grin mockingly and ask if the boy is leaving for school so late at night dressed like that. Masamune narrows his eyes as he concludes that Kudome's gang also managed to find out his family's home address. He closes the gate silently, remembering that the technique taught by his father is purely lethal and destructive if used carelessly. The protagonist clutches his fist tightly, remembering that he always avoided using his strength against ordinary people. But now things are different. One of the thugs steps forward shouting with hatred and throws a violent punch at the boy to start the fight in the middle of the street. The aggressor becomes irritated by the protagonist's lack of reaction, while Masamune mentally concludes that he has finally understood everything. With extremely fluid and precise movement, he slides under the enemy's punch without showing the slightest effort. He prepares the counter-attack, reflecting that simply defending and dodging attacks never saved anyone in the end. With a devastating punch, the protagonist strikes the attacker squarely in the chin, instantly breaking his fighting stance. His gaze burns with coldness as he declares that only the complete annihilation of the aggressors guarantees the protection of the innocent. The bully is thrown backward, collapsing heavily to the ground, while the other henchman watches the scene in utter despair. Without giving him time to react, he moves like a blur and delivers a precise blow to the throat of his second opponent on the sidewalk. The young man delivers a high, devastating kick, concluding that a real battlefield isn't just where there are gunshots. The last opponent with a spiked staff tries to attack him from above while the hero focuses on what is truly worth protecting. With absurd flexibility, the hero strikes the attacker's chin with his outstretched foot, thus establishing his new battlefield. The boy screams in agonizing pain, dropping his makeshift weapon to the ground as he falls defeated before the protagonist's technique. With quick reflexes, Masamune grabs the spiked bat before it even touches the ground, taking complete control of the situation. Wielding the improvised weapon, he stares at the fallen delinquents with a chilling coldness worthy of a seasoned mercenary. The fallen henchman trembles in utter terror as he sees the nail-studded tip of the baton right at eye level, begging for his life. He cowers against the steps in panic as Masamune simply discards the stick, letting it roll across the dark sidewalk. He pulls out his cell phone, dials the police emergency number, and warns that home invasion carries severe prison penalties. The hero dryly advises the aggressors to use their time in prison to seriously reflect on all their cowardly acts. Leaving his defeated enemies on the asphalt, Masamune continues on his way, deciding that he will fight only of his own free will from now on. His firm, rhythmic steps echoed through the silent hallway of the empty school, indicating that the hero had finally reached his goal. The boy moves forward with determination and enters the large school building under the dark and silent cloak of that decisive night. Kudome greets him with a sickly smile atop a table, keeping the young Sakura immobilized and gagged under his control. Sakura trembles and cries in panic with her mouth covered by the attacker's hand, but she stares at the hero hoping to be rescued again. The protagonist faces the leader with an expression filled with pure fury and coldness, ready for the final confrontation at that location. From the outside, we see the two facing each other through the windows of the school, illuminated under the starry sky of the decisive confrontation. Kudome stares at his opponent down the window and disdainfully asks if he really considers himself Sakura's friend. He violently pulls the frightened young woman aside and sadistically declares that the two are now officially dating. Masamune repeats the word in a dry, icy manner, unfazed by the delinquent leader's cheap provocation. However, the sight of his surrendered classmate makes the hero clench his fist tightly, gathering even more determination. Kudome laughs loudly, amused by the absolute power he wields over the two students at that moment. The boss makes a move to go back into the room, mentioning the young Sakura's full name in a threatening and deliberate manner. Suddenly, he stops upon hearing a strange noise coming from the school's lower floor, his expression changing to one of doubt. The henchman in charge of guarding the entrance warns that something is wrong and that the intruder is advancing quickly. Masamune encounters a crowd of thugs armed with pieces of wood and iron bars in the schoolyard. While holding the hostage, the criminal leader pulls out his cell phone and makes an urgent call to the group's mysterious hacker. He cruelly orders his partner to completely destroy the hero's father's factory system, leaving nothing intact. On the other end of the line, the hacker Nighthawk listens to the order in silence and monotonously replies that he understands the command. The red-haired leader laughs hysterically, believing he has already ensured the complete ruin of his opponent today. Aware of the imminent danger to his family, Masamune dashes like lightning toward the school's entrance gate. A bald, physically imposing delinquent blocks the hero's path, attempting to stop him by brute force. The protagonist doesn't even blink and stares at the new obstacle, with an icy gaze focused purely on his main objective for the night. Meanwhile, inside a dark room, the hacker thoughtfully observes the night view before beginning his virtual work. He stares at his cell phone screen while the brutal combat between the hero and dozens of armed thugs rages down in the courtyard. The hacker murmurs to himself that he agrees to fulfill the deal, but only if the carrot boy manages to win that battle. Back in the classroom, Kudom boasts about being in a good mood, while keeping poor Sakura cornered in the room. With mockery, he proposes a romantic encounter at the hero's family dojo, laughing at the panic etched on the hostage's face. He ridiculously fantasizes about beating up the elderly dojo masters to prove his superior strength and impress the girl. Sakura ignores the useless chatter and silently prays that Masamune doesn't end up getting hurt in that trap. The delinquent leader notices the young woman's lack of attention, and his expression changes to one of visible displeasure. Retsu laughs at himself, accepting that it might be too early for a date, but assures himself that destroying the school is a good start. Suddenly, a panting and frightened henchman opens the door to the room, calling for the boss with an expression of pure despair. Kudome is annoyed by the interruption, but the messenger urgently reports that the enemy has just stormed the school entrance. Upon hearing the news, Sakura's heart races and her eyes shine with hope, knowing that he truly came to save her. The villain displays a smile of pure excitement, pleased to see that his opponent had the audacity to go so far in his quest. Meanwhile, on the first floor, Masamune advances, violently knocking down anyone who tries to block his path. Kudome disdainfully comments that the thugs on the ground floor were just useless bait, sent only to tire out the protagonist. Determined and showing no sign of fatigue, Masamune runs up the school stairs towards the next level. The red-haired boss laughs cruelly, assuring the hero that the real challenge awaits on the second floor of the school. He boasts of having gathered the worst and strongest delinquents on that floor to put a definitive end to the young intruder. Upon reaching the top of the stairs, Masamune encounters a gang of armed thugs ready to slaughter him without mercy. The hero raises his fist, maintaining a cold expression, like someone who has faced entire armies and will not be shaken by so little. He challenges the entire group, arrogantly ordering them to bring everyone who is still hiding to the fight at once. The protagonist taunts the aggressors by shouting that even with all of them gathered together, the number of adversaries is still too low. Enraged by the boy's insolence, the leader of the thugs loudly orders everyone to advance and crush the cheeky one. The entire gang leaps and charges wildly down the stairs toward Masamune, initiating a violent mass combat. The protagonist's eyes gleam with a deadly crimson hue, revealing his true face as a seasoned war assassin. In an overwhelming sequence of rapid blows, Masamune beats and knocks out each of the aggressors who try to hit him there. Up there, Retsu lazily comments that mobilizing so many people for just one boy was an exaggeration, but Hirakawa insisted a lot. Suddenly, the villain's gaze focuses on the entrance to the room as he hears firm, rhythmic footsteps approaching the bedroom door. He scoffs, saying that as soon as the hero is massacred by that bunch of nobodies, young Sakura will lose all hope. The villain grins wickedly, concluding that after the humiliating defeat, she will finally forget about the karate boy. But the firm, unwavering steps continue up the stairs at a steady pace that belies any sign of fatigue. The silence in the hallway is broken, and the delinquent leader's eyes widen as he realizes his army has failed miserably. The henchman in charge of surveillance calls in absolute panic, reporting that the intruder has just massacred the forces on the first floor. The revealed scene shows all the thugs from the second floor fallen and completely defeated by the protagonist on the ground. Kudome Retsu gets angry when he realizes that the intruder managed to easily get through the first floor of the school. He sees one of his henchmen thrown against the wall after receiving an extremely powerful blow. The delinquent leader grins bizarrely upon noticing that his opponent has also overcome the second floor of defense. The boy strikes an imposing pose, indicating that the real battle against the bosses is about to begin. The thugs, armed with iron bars, position themselves with furious expressions, ready to attack. They block the entrance to the room, waiting for the exact moment the door opens to attack their rival. With a chilling stare, Kudome gives the order to assassinate, leaving young Sakura completely terrified. Firm footsteps echo through the place as the intruder finally crosses the threshold of the room's entrance door. One of the bullies raises his stick with a sadistic grin, ready to deliver a fatal blow to the protagonist. The thugs strike with all their might, but end up hitting a dummy disguised with a red hood on the ground. The delinquent leader revels in Sakura's despair as she screams in terror at all the extreme violence. The accomplices smile victoriously, believing they managed to defeat the feared adversary without difficulty. However, they realize that the fallen person was just one of their own allies who had been knocked out earlier. The bloodied colleague stares at his partners in surprise, revealing that he was used as a shield by the hero. Suddenly, the real Masamune appears, delivering a devastating punch that disfigures the face of one of his opponents. A spectacular kick sends another delinquent flying, while the hero positions himself in the center of the classroom. Masamune advances, his eyes red with fury, and delivers an extremely fast and destructive straight punch. Kudome Retsu sweats nervously and shouts protagonist's name upon realizing the unbelievable strength of his opponent. The remaining henchmen are thrown into the air by the force of the precise blows delivered by the hero. The boy calmly adjusts his tie and firmly declares that he has come to take Shireshi back home. The girl cries with immense happiness and relief upon seeing the boy standing before her, ready to save her once and for all. Kudome gets down from the stack of school desks, accepting the challenge with a mocking and relaxed tone. The delinquent leader walks towards the protagonist, stating that he will make sure to confront him personally. With a sadistic grin, the villain pulls out an extremely sharp combat knife to use in the direct confrontation. Masamune observes the blade with complete coldness, remaining absolutely silent in the face of the dangerous provocation. Retsu throws the knife into the air, mocking his opponent and warning him that he won't leave there with just a few bruises. The protagonist demonstrates complete indifference, leaving the villain extremely confused by his apathetic reaction. He simply tells his opponent coldly to use whatever weapon they prefer for that fight. The hero stares at him with an icy look, asking how long he plans to spend just talking there. Kudome gripped the handle of his knife tightly, angrily stating that he would do exactly what the boy wanted right then. The villain leaps forward in a desperate cry of rage, promising to murder the protagonist immediately. Masamune stands imposingly before his enemies, while Shireshi observes him with deep admiration in his eyes. Kudome Retsu grinds his teeth in pure frustration upon realizing his opponent's extreme self-confidence. He gets down from the school desks, accepting the confrontation with the boy in a rather hostile and direct manner. The delinquent leader walks towards him, vowing to confront the hero without hesitation. The villain pulls out a tactical knife with a macabre smile on his face, ready to start the bloody fight right there. The hero stares at him without showing any sign of fear or concern in the face of his opponent's dangerous blade. Retsu twirls the object between his fingers with superiority, warning that the hero will not leave the place with only injuries. The protagonist responds with complete indifference, leaving the criminal extremely confused by that icy reaction. The boy tells him to use whatever weapon he wants and ironically asks how long he will continue talking. Kudome Retsu's eyes widen with pure hatred as he feels utterly humiliated by his rival's contemptuous words. The delinquent advances at high speed, raising the blade and shouting furiously that he will end the boy's life. The attacker delivers a swift blow towards the protagonist, displaying a completely manic and insane expression with perfect reflexes. Masamune intercepts his opponent's weapon, blocking the fatal attack with precision. The villain maintains a sickly grin, confident in his physical strength advantage over the protagonist. Kudome tries to force the blade, mocking the frail body of the boy, who struggles to contain the opponent's attack. The hero manages to firmly withstand the pressure of the knife, leaving the delinquent leader visibly uncomfortable. Retsu begins to lose control of the situation and realizes too late that things are getting bad for him. Masamune performs an agile dodge, forcing his opponent to retreat while he assesses his own fighting condition. The young hero concludes that fighting, using the physical limitations of a high school student's body is very difficult. Masamune realizes that his current brute physical strength is far inferior to that of the dangerous delinquent leader. Faced with this terrible obstacle, the hero closes his eyes and decides that he can no longer hold back in the fight. The wind blows strongly in the air as the confrontation reaches an absurd level of tension. Retsu senses a sudden change in the atmosphere and his eyes widen, not understanding what is happening there. A bright blue aura surrounds the hero's body, revealing an infinitely more terrifying presence. With a deadly look, Masamune praises the instincts of his opponent, who finally sensed the real danger. He warns that he will no longer hold back his attacks, but the villain gets angry, thinking he is being underestimated. The young man examines his hands, knowing he needs to end the fight in the shortest time possible. The red-haired delinquent is shocked to see the unbelievable speed with which the hero acts. Masamune moves like a true blur, advancing directly against the opposing leader's defense. Retsu tries to react in time, but panics when he notices that his opponent is already right in front of him. The hero expertly dodges and initiates a sequence of highly precise strikes against the delinquent. Retsu stares at his opponent in utter despair as a fist charged with energy comes towards him. A brutal and precise punch hits the villain squarely in the abdomen, completely breaking his resistance there. Kudome spits blood and writhes in pain, feeling the overwhelming power of the protagonist's attack. The knife flies through the air, revealing that the hero used the enemy's own weapon only as a distraction. Masamune retrieves the weapon in midair, demonstrating superhuman agility that startles all the spectators. He finishes off his opponent by throwing him with extreme violence against the school desks in the classroom. The gang leader crashes heavily against the ground, unable to mount any kind of defensive reaction. Kudome lies stretched out on the ground, completely defeated and unable to get up after the physical punishment he suffered. With his face bloodied, he stares at the ceiling and tries to process the terrible feeling of near death that he felt. A terrifying vision of the hero as the Grim Reaper himself, wielding a scythe, flashes through the villain's mind. Utterly horrified, the delinquent stammers that he's facing a true reaper of human lives. Masamune points the sharp knife directly at the face of his defeated opponent, maintaining an icy stare. A dark memory from the hero's mercenary past resurfaces in his mind, revealing desperate cries for mercy. An enemy soldier trapped in the forest beds for his life, claiming he was only hired for the mission. He promises to hand over valuable information if the mercenary spares him, but terror takes over his face. The young mercenary in the past just stares at the man above with a gun pointed at him, showing no mercy whatsoever. The enemy soldier cries desperately as he realizes his life is about to be taken on the battlefield. With coldness, the trigger is pulled, ending yet another life in that scene of destruction and horror of war. Masamune stands silently in the middle of the dark forest, surrounded by several lifeless bodies of defeated soldiers, observes the tragedy of war with melancholy, while a distant voice begins to call him back to reality. Suddenly, Sakura's voice echoes loudly, causing the hero to awaken from his traumatic and violent memories. The girl firmly holds Masamune's arm, preventing him from doing something truly crazy in the room. Crying profusely, she begs him to stop and states that it's all over, and they are finally safe there. Upon seeing his rival unconscious on the ground, the protagonist calms down and realizes that he really doesn't need to go any further. The remaining henchmen watch everything, panting with exhaustion and terror at the terrible power displayed by the hero. Overcome with absolute panic, they flee, running desperately through the silent corridors of the dark school. Masamune looks back thoughtfully, taking in the sudden calm that has settled in the classroom. He drops the weapon, letting it fall to the ground, and deeply questions what he is really doing there. The boy recalls his betrayal and death in a past life before mysteriously returning to his school days. He bitterly reflects on whether getting involved in schoolyard fights is really his current life priority. Upon seeing him walk towards the exit, young Sakura runs after him, desperately begging him to wait. Without turning around, the hero sternly warns Shirashi that she should in no way continue to get involved with him. The girl is completely shocked and confused, unable to understand the reason for his sudden withdrawal. With his back turned, the young man claims to be a murderer and assures her that nothing good will happen if she insists on staying near him. He coldly asks to be left alone while the girl's eyes fill with tears of deep pain. Masamune walks alone, thinking that even in that young body, he has confirmed that he possesses full fighting ability. He concludes that his best move would be to return as soon as possible to the real battlefields of his homeland. Suddenly, Sakura jumps on his back, giving him a tight hug, leaving the boy completely shocked and speechless. Masamune turns around in surprise as he feels a sudden, warm weight pressing against his back. He realizes that young Sakura has fainted from exhaustion and fallen into a deep sleep, leaning on his shoulder. The boy recalls the moment when he tried to push her out of his life, harshly claiming to be a dangerous killer. He recalls the girl's shocked expression upon hearing that nothing good would happen if she stayed near him. The young man had concluded that his best option at the time was simply to abandon everything and return to the war. Masamune believed that serving his country on the battlefields would be the only worthy destiny for his abilities. He coldly asked his colleague to release him, stating that he was by no means the type of person she imagined. However, the young woman cried and firmly denied the boy's attempt to isolate himself from everything and everyone there. Sakura declared that she didn't care about his past and affectionately assured him that he was her great hero. The boy tried to argue back, saying he only accepted a fight, but the young woman's determination left him speechless. Sakura eventually timidly agreed with his answer, maintaining a somewhat sad and downcast expression. Masamune reflects that his true desire was to save her and admits that he should have acted much sooner than the crisis. He formally bows before the young woman, offering sincere apologies for failing to protect her adequately. The boy takes full responsibility for not having foreseen the threat of aggression that had already been forming at the school. Sakura watches him confused as he mentions that Kudome's emergence was just the tip of the iceberg of something worse. He unconsciously begins to apply concepts of war damage friction to his new school reality. The hero ponders the terrible tragedy of the future that caused his death in his previous incarnation as a soldier. Masamune considers the strong possibility of using his return to the past to prevent that war from happening. Shiraishi calls him sweetly, pulling the boy from his deep and complex thoughts about the country's future. A slight smile appears on Masamune's face as he understands what his true mission is in this new timeline. He thanks her from the bottom of his heart, saying that in fact it was he who ended up being saved by her that night. The young woman is surprised by her colleague's mysterious words, but is overjoyed to see him smile so tenderly. She reflects that this must certainly be the first time she has seen the boy smile so sincerely. In a darkened room, dozens of high-tech monitors display detailed images from security cameras. An agile hand types on the keyboard, controlling the entire school surveillance system with extreme digital skill. The main screen shows Kudome lying defeated on the ground, and a voice mocks the delinquent leader's humiliating failure. The mysterious computer operator watches everything unfold in a relaxed manner from his comfortable leather chair. The talented hacker Hayato Himuro, known as Nighthawk, celebrates the fact that he stayed far away from that mess. He focuses the camera lenses on Masamune's image and shows great interest in his extraordinary abilities. The monitor records the friendly conversation between the two students as they walk side by side through the city's streets. Himuro analyzes the protagonist's serious face, realizing that something very dangerous is hidden beneath that facade. He smiles maliciously, observing that Masamune's father's company continues to be in trouble even without new digital intrusions. The day dawns sunny and clear over the school, where the students gather for the start of another ordinary day. Inside the classroom, the atmosphere seems calm, with students routinely organizing their materials. Sitting at his desk, Masamune reflects on the slim chances of averting that terrible future war on his own. Suddenly, former rival Kudome appears smiling, warmly greeting the protagonist in a friendly manner. The hero responds apathetically, while the delinquent casually complains about his lack of enthusiasm. Kudom sits at the next table and proudly declares that he accepts Masamune as his new absolute leader from now on. The classmates watch that bizarre interaction with their jaws dropped, not understanding the villain's sudden submission. The red-haired boy praises the hero for knowing how to conceal his terrifying strength and maintain an ordinary demeanor during the day. He adds that the hero is a true fighter, very different from the cowardly Hirakawa, who only knows how to use others. Suddenly, Hirakawa bursts into the room, shouting furiously upon seeing his main ally conversing amicably with his rival. The villain points his finger, demanding to know what is happening and how Masamune managed to bring Kudom to his side. Kudom calmly stands up, denying that he was bought or blackmailed into any kind of deal with the hero. Without any warning, the red-haired boy delivers a violent slap to Hirakawa's face, telling him to shut up. He coldly declares the law of survival of the fittest, stating that only the most powerful should dictate the rules. He laughs loudly, assuring everyone that he'll take care of any annoying bully, while Masamune just watches him with utter dismay. Kudom places his hand on the hero's shoulder in an intimate way, demonstrating that he intends to be his most loyal partner at school. With a mischievous smile, he suggests that he will also take care of Masamune's entire romantic life from then on. The protagonist becomes completely confused and irritated, unable to understand what his colleague is trying to say. Outside the charming Kudom cafeteria, he intercepts another delinquent who appeared to be loitering around the place suspiciously. He grabs the man by the collar, ordering him quite aggressively never to set foot in that cafe again. Oblivious to the commotion outside, the two young men calmly await their orders to be delivered to the table. The waitress finally serves a cup of strawberry ice cream, extremely elaborate and decorated with syrups. Sakura clasps her hands together in immense happiness, marveling at the delicious dessert that has just arrived for her. The girl asks if her colleague is sure he won't ask for anything sweet, and he simply confirms by nodding his head. He explains that sweet foods decrease his cognitive performance, and therefore he prefers to avoid them for efficiency. The young woman smiles amicably as she notices how incredibly focused and strict the young man is with himself. The protagonist replies that he simply follows his own rules to maintain maximum efficiency in his daily routine. Ignoring the speech, Sakura extends a spoonful of ice cream directly towards the boy's mouth. She invites him to try just a small piece, insisting with a gentle smile that he cannot refuse the offer. Masamune stares at the candy for a few moments, feeling won over by his classmate's adorable persistence. He opens his mouth and accepts the spoonful of ice cream offered kindly, breaking his own strict rule. Sakura stares at him curiously, cheeks puffed out, immediately asking what he thought of the taste of the dessert. The boy chews silently with his eyes closed, savoring the sugary taste he hasn't experienced in his mouth for a long time. He nostalgically confesses that the taste of the candy seems to have the true and comforting flavor of pure happiness. The girl breaks into a huge, radiant smile from ear to ear, happy to have given the boy that moment. Outside, Kudom observes the entire scene, crouched among the bushes with a discreet smile on his face. Sakura continues laughing happily at the table, while sharing that pleasant and peaceful meal with the hero. The offender admits that he could never get that smile out of her and concludes that the young woman is truly special. Later, they walk through the busy streets of the city center, which are full of people strolling. The attention of people on the sidewalk is drawn to an important news broadcast on the building's huge screen. The reporter announces the start of a violent armed civil conflict taking place in the territory of the East African Republic. Masamune freezes upon hearing about the clashes, realizing that future events have already begun to unfold. The images show the chaos of the urban civil war on the mall's television, while the crowd continues to pass by oblivious. The news reports several casualties at the scene of the confrontation, and the students watch the screen apprehensively. The protagonist adopts an extremely serious expression upon realizing that the countdown to tragedy has already begun. He recalls the devastating flames and chaotic destruction that marked the beginning of the great conflict in which he fought. The young man recalls that the conflict in Africa was the trigger that caused the mass mobilization of his group of mercenaries. Sakura interrupts her thoughts, announcing that the pedestrian light has finally turned green and they can cross the street. He apologizes, snapping out of his pensive trance, and begins to walk briskly across the pedestrian crossing on the avenue. He concludes that attempting to intervene directly at the moment of his own death would be an extremely risky move. His firm steps guide him along the busy sidewalk as he mentally strategizes how to contain the tragedy. Masamune wonders what practical work he could possibly do, currently being just a student in Japan. The boy knows very well that no one would listen to the advice of a simple schoolchild on matters of war. He laments his current weakness, concluding directly that his main need at the moment is to obtain information. Sakura excitedly points to a shop window, suggesting they take a look at the clothes, and the boy agrees docilely. They enter a stylish store, and the girl excitedly chooses an item, suggesting that her classmate try it on. Masamune puts on the dark jacket and jeans outfit, looking seriously in the large mirror of the fitting room. Sakura exclaims that the outfit suits him very well, but the boy is concerned about the fabric's thinness. The young woman chooses a pair of blue jeans, happily commenting that the fabric seems very easy to move in during daily activities. The boy examines the piece and comments the material would be useful for containing small fragments from explosions in battle. They continue their friendly stroll through the shopping center, walking hand in a moment of pure tranquility. The hero proudly displays a camouflage military jacket covered in spikes, leaving the girl completely terrified. Soon after, they visit a toy store and have fun choosing and holding cute stuffed animals in their hands. Outside, Sakura sincerely thanks him for appearing once again to save her from all that real danger. The protagonist tells her not to worry about it, assuring her that he only acted according to his own free will. The girl stares intently at him, her cheeks flushed, processing the true meaning of the boy's kind statement. She concludes romantically that for the boy, saving her was actually something he desired with all his heart. Masamune remains standing, holding the shopping bag with an upright and serious posture befitting a brave elite soldier. Night falls silently over the city as the two young people say goodbye, promising to see each other at school the next day. The next day, the sun shines brightly in the blue sky, announcing the start of another pleasant morning routine. Back in his kitchen, Masamune receives a warm good morning from his father before sitting down to have coffee. The young man asks worriedly if the problem with the company's digital system was completely resolved last night. The man cheerfully confirms that despite the hacking, there was no real damage to the family business. The father smiles, commenting that since it's a small factory, the virtual intruder must have just gotten bored in the middle of the process. The protagonist responds feigning calmness, but deep down he knows very well that the invasion was no accident. The young man thoughtfully reflects that it is impossible for them gotten out of that critical situation, suffering any kind of consequence. Moments later, the school's facade appears with students hurrying towards the start of the day's classes. While tying his shoes in the lockers, Masamune is surprised by a voice asking about his father's company. Intrigued by the unexpected question, the boy calmly turns around to identify who is approaching him. He encounters a classmate with wavy blue hair and glasses who sports a mysterious smile. The young man with glasses directly mentions the name of the protagonist's family business, demonstrating a great deal of knowledge about them. He formally introduces himself as Shun Himuro and begins to reveal his true secret identity to his classmate. Himuro straightens his posture arrogantly, proudly revealing the codename by which he is known worldwide on the internet. With a smug smile, he reveals himself as Nighthawk, the legendary and dangerous hacker who orchestrated the cyber attack. Masamune is in complete shock when he realizes that the intruder in his house is right there in front of him disguised as a student. The hacker disdainfully confesses that he was paid by Kudome, but decided not to force the attack because he thought the specifications were poor. He pulls out his cell phone with a serious expression, claiming that the real problem right now isn't about that cyber attack. The boy extends the screen displaying confidential information about the industrial business and and contracts of Masamyun's father. The hacker reveals with extreme coldness that the small family business appears to be doing direct business with the dangerous Yakuza. The hero's eyes widen, overcome with deep concern, upon hearing the name of the feared Japanese criminal faction. Himuro invites him to his digital hideout and shows him the monitors with the confidential data from the contract signed by his father. The official document appears in detail on the bright screen, revealing suspicious contractual terms and abusive clauses. Masamyun reads the data carefully, focusing on the name of the partner company involved in the entire commercial transaction. He questions whether the corporation described on paper is in fact a front run by the ruthless Japanese mafia. The hacker explains seriously that the company is just a legal front to hide the crimes of the Gendokai syndicate. He types quickly, warning that the vague details in the document serve only to force an unfair agreement on the father. Without any warning, the protagonist reappears from behind and presses a sharp object directly against the hacker's jugular. Himuro's eyes widen in indescribable terror as he perceives Masamyun's silent and deadly speed. The hero demands that the boy immediately reveal whether he is an ally or a dangerous enemy before continuing the conversation. Trembling, the hacker claims to be neither of them, confessing that he only follows orders in exchange for financial compensation. He raises his hands, claiming that his routine consists of stealing confidential data from the organized crime underworld for third parties. Masamyun is suspicious of the explanation and questions the real reason why he is revealing such dangerous secrets about his family. He demands to know his intentions, making it clear that he does not have any money to pay for that information. The hacker swears with his hands raised that he's not interested in money, but in something much more personal and enigmatic. The hero stares at him suspiciously and repeats the word curiosity, intrigued by the unusual motivation presented by the boy. Himuro reveals with a bold smile that his true interest lies in the mysterious power that the hero himself possesses. He quickly explains himself nervously to avoid any awkward misunderstandings that might irritate Masamyun. The hacker confesses that the Yakuza hates him and thought the hero's skills would be ideal for dealing with this threat. Masamyun coldly replies that he has no interest whatsoever in getting involved in dangerous fights against the mafia in his country. Himuro questions the refusal, directly pointing out the dubious relationship the protagonist's father has with the criminal group. The hacker grimly warns that ignoring the mafia could ultimately cost his own father his life. The hero panics upon hearing that, remembering that in his past life his father died in a tragic fire. Masamyun is shocked by the tragic revelation, realizing the terrible link between the past and his father's death long ago. The boy clearly remembers the flames devouring his family's small factory, marking the end of his mentor's life. He bitterly laments, confessing that he had always firmly believed that the fire had been just a sad accident. His eyes narrow as he considers the terrifying possibility that the tragedy was coldly planned by the fearsome Yakuza. Back to reality in the empty classroom, the sound of footsteps at the door abruptly interrupts their secret conversation. The two young people stare intently towards the entrance in complete silence, knowing that danger could come from anywhere now. The teacher opens the hallway door, sternly warning that access to unused classrooms is prohibited. However, when he looks inside the place, he finds only a completely empty and silent classroom. Confused, the man scratches his head and walks away down the hallway, concluding that it was all just his imagination. After the teacher leaves, the young hacker opens the hidden door of a locker, confirming that the path is completely clear. The hero accompanies him and praises the complexity of the secret structure assembled inside the utility closet in that room. Masamyun observes with curiosity the hidden room, filled with electronic equipment and high-tech monitors. Himuro explains that he used an abandoned storage facility, but complains the teacher patrols have increased significantly there. The hero jokes that maybe they're looking for him, but the hacker claims the school has just become more violent. Masamyun questions the statement, pointing out that Kudom's absence should have made the school routine much calmer. The hacker explains that without a leader to command respect, the underage delinquents began to act freely throughout the rooms. He reveals with concern the existence of frightening rumors about drug trafficking and robberies at the school. Masamune apathetically reflects that groups without leadership tend to crumble quickly, even outside of battlefields. Later, the Corona family dojo appears bathed in the sunset as the father announces the end of the day's exhausting training. The two combatants lower their wooden swords in the center of the tatami, officially ending the afternoon's activities. Masamune thoughtfully wipes away the sweat from his own eyes, trying to decide how he will approach the delicate subject of the Yakuza with his father. Gathering courage, the young man calls out to the man, stating that he needs to have a very serious business conversation with him, but that the boy gives up on asking directly about the mafia, concluding that it would be too dangerous to expose everything at once there. Instead, the hero changes strategy and directly asks to start helping with the day-to-day work of the business. The father reacts with visible surprise upon hearing the unusual request from his young son, who has never shown any interest in work. Masamune justifies this by saying he wants to help alleviate his father's difficult routine and offers to do any necessary tasks. The father is deeply moved by his son's maturity and gentle attitude, and a very welcoming smile appears on his face. The man gratefully accepts the help, leaving the hero extremely relieved to have gained the access he needed. The next day, the hero appears, sitting in front of the family karate dojo under the light of a very clear morning. Masamune mentally complains about his bad luck, noting that the job his father gave him was simply to recruit new students. Suddenly, a beautiful young woman wearing white shorts and a pink blouse approaches the place, catching the young man's attention. The hero is surprised to recognize his classmate Sakura, who is also surprised to find him there on the weekend. He questions the reason for her visit to the dojo on Saturday, and the girl stammers a little, showing considerable shyness at the time. Sakura gathers her courage and confesses that she would very much like to learn martial arts, asking if he could be her instructor. Masamune is intrigued by the request, remembering that in his past life she never showed any interest in training there. The girl explains that after being saved so many times, she has concluded that she absolutely needs to know how to defend herself during the day. The boy reflects that his constant interference has ended up changing the normal course of the timeline and worries about it. He earnestly warns her that she doesn't need to fight, assuring her that after graduation, she won't have to be involved with him anymore. Hearing her colleague's icy statement, Sakura is deeply shocked, feeling painfully rejected by him. Suddenly, hostile footsteps echo through the entrance of the place as a group of armed assailants approaches dangerously. The two young men immediately turn towards the gate of the karate dojo, alert to the intruding presence of the strangers. Three delinquents armed Bathans appear laughing and claiming that defeating the hero will settle their gambling debts. Sakura is startled, asking who they are, but the hero only maintains his icy gaze, questioning what they want there. The thugs mockingly reveal that they have come to destroy the dojo and rudely assure that they will take the girl with them. Completely terrified, the young woman cowers in panic, crying out for help in the face of that violent and dangerous threat. Masamune steps forward, extending his arm protectively to prevent the criminals from getting close to the girl. The boy assumes an imposing martial combat stance and calmly orders everyone to attack him all at once right there. The armed criminals advance violently, shouting that this massacre had been planned from the very beginning. With a single roundhouse kick, the hero knocks out all three opponents in an extremely agile manner in the courtyard. The gang leader recoils in terror, cursing in panic as he witnesses the absurd fighting power of his young opponent. Upon closer inspection of the henchman's face, Sakura is shocked to realize that the aggressors are actually her own colleagues. Seeing that his disguise has been exposed, the delinquent screams in complete panic, ordering the group to retreat immediately. The three boys turn around and run away screaming desperately down the sidewalk, leaving their makeshift weapons behind. Sakura watches them run, perplexed, commenting with relief that the cowardly delinquents really did flee. The attackers run through the block to save their skins, quickly disappearing from sight on the horizon of the quiet neighborhood. In the shadows, a dangerous Yakuza member observes the entire cowardly escape and coldly concludes that simple street kids don't stand a chance. Shiraishi thanks Corona, who tells her not to worry about it. The boy promises that he will protect her from now on so that she no longer needs to fight. The girl smiles in relief as she realizes his feelings and shyly agrees. In a dark and isolated alley in the city, 3 delinquents meet to talk. 2 of them are terrified and discussing the impossibility of defeating the dojo's hero. The hooded boy asks for calm so that they can think of a way out of the problem. He displays a wicked smile and suggests using illicit substances before deciding anything. The other 2 accomplices tremble in agreement and smile at their partner's proposal. Suddenly, Kudom emerges from the shadows of the alley, drawing the group's attention in a serious manner. The red-haired leader approaches, keeping his hands in his pockets with extreme coldness. Kudum gets very angry and asks if they messed with the wrong person again. The offender panics completely and desperately tries to deny the boss's accusation. Without mercy, Kudum delivers a crushing blow directly to the liar's face. The other 2 watch in horror as their partner falls unconscious to the ground in the alley. Kudum shoots a deadly look, angrily warning them not to push their luck. He quickly advances and attacks the second accomplice, who screams desperately in panic. The hooded youth bites his own coat, trembling with terror at the sight of his boss's violence. Kudum delivers a violent blow to the last boy, ending that punishment. With the 3 opponents unconscious, the young man with red hair calmly wipes his hands. He complains about their audacity and suddenly notices something suspicious lying on the alley floor. Your attention is drawn to the small package of drugs that your accomplice dropped. Kudum crouches down and picks up the plastic packaging, curious to understand what it is. An authoritative voice pronounces the boy's name, making the atmosphere tense. The young man with red hair looks up in surprise at being caught in that situation. He recognizes the Komiya advisor from the student guidance department, standing right in front of him. The advisor stares at him seriously and questions what he has in his hands. The suspicious package containing the white powder is clearly visible in the hands of the cornered young man. Kudum panics completely and tries to justify himself by saying that it doesn't belong to him. Komiya displays a malicious smile and cynically concludes that they are illegal substances. A few days pass in the city, and the scene returns to the facade of the ordinary school. A student walks calmly through the quiet corridors of the institution. An official industrial manufacturing agreement document is prominently displayed on the screen. Suddenly, Hirakawa is struck by a violent blow and slides across the hallway floor. Corona watches the scene in surprise, recognizing the bully lying right in front of him. Hirakawa angrily wipes the blood from his mouth, cursing the new aggressors there. 2 new delinquents laugh mockingly at the humiliating downfall of the school's former leader. They mock him, saying that he is absolutely nothing without Kudom's support and leftovers. The fallen bully shouts threats about his father, but the opponents show no fear. Suddenly, one of the attackers is startled to notice the presence of another person there. Corona appears, staring coldly at the group, intimidating the delinquents. The hero walks right past the bullies, who continue sweating profusely, and watch him leave. Hirakawa screams in anger and frustration as he sees himself humiliated in every possible way. Corona sits at her desk, pondering the organization's connection to her father's death. The boy focuses on his cell phone, determined to uncover the secrets of that agreement. The screen displays the website of a large industrial corporation that hides shady dealings. He concludes that he will need to go directly to the shell company to get the answers. Suddenly, a hand strikes the boy's table with extreme force, startling the protagonist. Corona raises her gaze with complete seriousness to face the author of that interruption. The injured Hirakawa stares at him angrily and demands to know if the hero wants anything from him. The bully grinds his teeth in pure rage as he watches the hero act so calmly in front of him. Hirakawa complains that he should have expelled the hero personally and receives a cold response from the boy. The bully gets angry and grabs Corona by the collar, asking if he wants to start a fight. Corona calmly says that her rival trusted the wrong person and ponders the weight of her own strength. He remembers a mysterious and very imposing man who had a striking star-shaped scar. The protagonist remains silent while continuing to relive memories of his past life. He stares into nothingness, concluding that the only people he trusted were those willing to betray him. Hirakawa is extremely annoyed annoyed and surprised by the hero's icy and unwavering response. He lets go of the boy's collar, cursing the situation, while Corona just stares back at him. The bully walks away grumbling angrily and admits that he should never have trusted Kudome. He continues to murmur that the leader got involved in extremely dangerous things at the school. Corona is very surprised to hear that Kudome ended up getting directly involved with trafficking. He quickly extends his arm and firmly grabs the shoulder of his colleague, who was trying to leave. Corona assumes a very frightening expression and sternly orders her rival to tell everything. Completely terrified by the protagonist's icy gaze, the boy agrees to reveal the truth. Silence returns for a few moments to the empty, gray corridors of the school. Corona checks her sides very cautiously, making sure no one is watching her every move. He knocks on the door of the secret locker and receives immediate permission to enter the premises. The boy enters the dark room stealthily, without attracting the attention of the other students. The hacker greets him in a relaxed manner, commenting that he's getting better and better at it. Corona confirms that the path was clear, and her bespectacled friend questions the reason for the visit. The hero directly recounts that he heard rumors about Kudome's involvement with illegal trafficking. The hacker adjusts his glasses, intrigued, and wonders if that might have been a trap. He considers that the delinquent leader is foolish, but would never agree to buy something from third parties. The boy warns that his rival was only suspended due to a lack of real evidence against him at school. The hacker jokes that the police would have already been called if he were the hero involved in the case. He suspiciously asks why the protagonist is so worried about his old rival. Corona reveals her plan to use her rival's connection to the Yakuza, leaving her friend shocked. The hero makes a funny and naive expression when questioning whether things don't work that way. The hacker explains that the local mafia would never accept another organization operating in their territory. Corona wonders if breaking into the front company would be the quickest way to get the answers. The friend advises against the idea of a direct attack, claiming that the financial data has been concealed. Several encrypted confidential files appear on the bright screen of one of the monitors. He boldly points his finger and suggests he has a much better plan to track them down. He explains that criminal connections are already actively circulating throughout the college. The monitor screen displays a security recording of a transaction occurring in the funds. The two silently conclude that the shortest path is simply to go after the supplier. In the school's outer courtyard, two students anxiously negotiate with the hooded drug dealer. The trafficker displays the package and threatens to sell it to someone else if they don't pay soon. One of the students opens his wallet, visibly nervous, agreeing to pay the given price. Corona suddenly appears among the boys, demanding to know the origin of that merchandise. Watching everything from afar, the hacker chokes on his drink, terrified by the hero's audacity. The hooded delinquent enters into absolute panic upon recognizing the figure of the dangerous Corona. The two buyers run away desperately when they realize they've been caught there. The hero stares coldly at him, reminding him that he was one of the vandals who tried to break into the dojo. The criminal swallows hard and begins to sweat profusely, overcome by an indescribable terror at the scene. Corona clenches her fists, displaying a deadly aura, and asks if he's going to start talking. The delinquent's eyes widen as he feels the terrible, murderous pressure emanating from the boy. He raises his hands in surrender, stating that he is not a fool and promises to tell all the secrets. The hero drops his fighting stance, satisfied that he managed to save both of them time. In the midst of the shadows, a dark and mysterious gaze observes the situation with a sadistic smile. Suddenly, several mysterious men jump from the roof of the school, cornering the group in the courtyard. The hacker adjusts his glasses, extremely frightened upon seeing the arrival of those new aggressors. The hooded drug dealer screams in panic, not understanding who those mysterious men are. The hero looks back, maintaining his usual icy expression in the face of imminent danger. The gang of 5 thugs blocks the exits of the courtyard, completely surrounding the students. Corona quickly analyzes the situation and notices that their fighting stance is ridiculous. Despite this, the boy acknowledges that some have a very solid and well-trained physique. The hero asks if the hacker has any fighting experience and receives a scream of panic. The friend explains that he only has intelligence while one of the brutes runs to attack the hero. With superhuman reflexes, Corona easily dodges a violent punch from her opponent. He orders his bespectacled colleague to simply protect himself while the boy desperately flees. The protagonist delivers a highly accurate kick against the first opponent's defense. Corona blocks her opponent's quick attacks, demonstrating her great martial arts technique. The aggressor smiles arrogantly, confident in his own physical strength to defeat the boy. The protagonist realizes that the rival managed to dodge and concludes that he has training. The opponent delivers a devastating punch, crossing the air at extreme speed towards the hero. The hero dodges the attack, analyzing that the opponent has a significant size advantage. With agility, he retaliates, delivering a brutal knee strike directly to his rival's stomach. The brute spits saliva from the force of the impact and writhes in pain from the blow. He falls unconscious and Corona turns to the other delinquents, who are trembling with panic in the courtyard. The hacker observes everything from afar, frightened, and concludes that the protagonist is truly ruthless. Suddenly, one of the delinquents appears behind Himuro, grabbing him with a wicked smile. The hacker screams desperately that he doesn't know how to fight, but the attacker warns that there will be no leak there. In a desperate attempt to defend himself, Himuro throws a can of drink in the direction of his rival. The object goes by far and the assailant starts laughing loudly, mocking the young man's terrible aim. Corona appears on top of the wall holding another can and coldly warns that he is the last one standing. The hero leaps from the wall and delivers a spectacular flying kick directly to his rival's face. He walks calmly, thanking them for their help, and comments that the enemy gang was disorganized. All the thugs brought to the ambush end up lying unconscious on the courtyard floor. Corona looks around with a rather serious expression, analyzing the outcome of that confrontation. He realizes that the small-time drug dealer in the hood took advantage of the confusion to try and escape. Without hesitation, the boy kicks the metal can with surgical force towards the fleeing man. The crumpled object crosses the air at high speed, whizzing eerily through the area. The can hits the drug dealer in the back, causing him to fall directly into the middle of a bush at the school. The fugitive celebrates, thinking he has escaped, but the hero silently reappears behind him. Desperate, the boy swears he doesn't know the attackers, and Corona tells him to continue his story. Trembling, he reveals that the transactions take place inside a locker in the old school building. He confesses that he is just a reseller and the hacker mentally notes the location of the locker. The protagonist grabs the boy by the neck and coldly orders him to show the exact location. The silence and shadows of the night begin to cover the vegetation around the school fence. Hidden behind a tree, Counselor Komiya observes everything with a frustrated expression. He notices the object thrown near his feet and realizes with horror that the hero has noticed his presence. The man complains about having hired professional fighters who were easily defeated. Corona keeps his gaze focused in the direction of the forest, knowing very well who was watching him. The advisor grinds his teeth in pure hatred, whispering the protagonist's name with rancor. The day dawns with the sun shining high on the facade of the old building of that institution. The small-time drug dealer points to one of the old cabinets, identifying it as Cabinet 13. The camera focuses on metal cabinet number 13, which shows some signs of wear on the paint. The hero tells them to go ahead, while his bespectacled friend agrees with determination. Corona firmly extends her right hand, ready to open the secret compartment there. Suddenly, Counselor Komiya appears right behind them and demands to know what they are doing there. Corona calmly turns around while her friend tries to lie in an extremely clumsy way. The advisor doubts the excuse, arguing that no one would visit that old building without a reason. Komiya approaches with a wry smile and asks if there's anything hidden in that old cabinet. He slowly opens the compartment, leaving the hacker at the bottom in a complete state of panic. Corona maintains an analytical and icy gaze while her bespectacled colleague continues to sweat profusely. The counselor looks inside the compartment and notes dryly that there is only trash. The interior of Cabinet 13 reveals only crushed empty cans and a torn adult magazine. The man picks up the magazine, stating that he will confiscate the item and orders the two to return to class. The hero remains suspicious and realizes that their search should not end at that moment. Komiya senses the tension in the air and stops, moving down the hallway with a slight tremor in her neck. The protagonist questions the man, pointing out that he knew perfectly well that the place was dangerous. Corona demands a clear answer, maintaining a firm and imposing posture before the advisor. The teacher's gaze narrows with hatred, showing that he was extremely uncomfortable there. The other two boys watch the confrontation in absolute silence, fearing the worst outcome. The man disguises himself with a fake smile, claiming he was just doing his routine patrol. He squeezes the magazine, crumpling the paper with such force that it reveals all his hidden fury. Komiya stares at Corona menacingly and tells the boy to be very careful with his tone of voice. His eyes convey a murderous fury as a vein bulges from his temple with pure hatred. He demands to be treated with the respect of a teacher, while the hero just stares back coldly. The hacker intervenes in a friendly manner, apologizing for his colleague's lack of manners. He drags the protagonist away quickly, while the hooded drug dealer also flees with them. The group runs away from there under the suspicious gaze of the fearsome advisor in the old courtyard. The bespectacled friend warns Corona about the danger of getting into trouble with the school disciplinarian. Himuro asks if the protagonist actually looked inside the closet during that search. The hero says he found no substances, and the small-time drug dealer swears he wasn't lying. Corona explains that although there were no packages, he noticed something valuable under the trash in the cupboard. He reveals that he found a large amount of cash hidden to the papers. The hacker assumes it's the payment, but considers that this doesn't prove the crime of trafficking there. The protagonist counters that he smelled a very strong odor of burnt plastic in the compartment. Corona remembers that the same strong chemical odor emanated from the advisor as he passed by him. His eyes widen as he immediately recognizes the source of that terrible smell. The hero remembers the dangerous stimulant used in combat zones during his life as a mercenary. The chemical substance described as the stimulant of Middle Eastern conflicts is revealed. He details the poor refinement of the product, leaving his bespectacled friend quite surprised. The hacker stares at the hero in utter shock, wondering what kind of dangerous life the young man led. Corona suggests placing hidden cameras to monitor the illegal transactions in that locker. The hacker agrees but warns that they will need to be careful not to be discovered by anyone. The hero concludes that the advisor knows everything and that they need to monitor him closely. The bespectacled hacker repeats Komiya's name, reflecting on the professor's shady connections. Meanwhile, in the dark closet, Komiya returns alone to the transaction compartment. He picks up the wad of banknotes left in the cupboard, proving his sordid crime. The advisor grins wickedly and greedily, savoring the easy profit from that sale. The next day, the sun shines brightly on the asphalt as the students head to school. Shiraishi notices an unusual crowd on the sidewalk and comments on the large number of people. The students gather at the entrance of the institution, where the counselor conducts inspections. Komiya jots down the information on her clipboard, inspecting the luggage of each student who enters. The teacher's expression changes, taking on a serious look as he sees the protagonist arrive. Shiraishi politely wishes him a good day, while Corona just stares at him coldly. The advisor responds falsely, and the hero directly questions the reason for the search. Inspector Komiya angrily announces that they are conducting an inspection of the school's dress code. He comments on campus security and releases Corona, saying his uniform is in order. But when he looks at Shiraishi, the man makes a scary face and says that her skirt is too short. The girl is surprised by the sudden accusation and asks if the outfit is really inappropriate. Shiraishi tries to defend herself, but the inspector orders her to accompany him to the orientation room. With a wicked grin, the man suggests they measure the length of the skirt inside the director's office. He grabs the student's wrist tightly, leaving the young woman quite frightened by his aggressive behavior. Corona observes the abuse of power and decides to intervene, ordering the inspector to immediately stop what he is doing. Inspector Komiya stops in his tracks and turns around angrily to see who dared to challenge his authority. The man asks if there is a problem, and Corona retorts by reminding him of what he said about the short skirt. The protagonist points to the uniform and reveals that her skirt measures exactly 52 centimeters. He claims that the garment is even longer than the skirts worn by the other female students at the school. The inspector asks if he measured the part himself, and Corona replies that she can tell just by looking. The boy demonstrates that the skills from his past life allow him to make perfect visual measurements. The man tries to laugh off the situation, claiming that what matters is how much leg is exposed above the knee. Shirashi panics when Corona calmly begins to calculate the actual length of her legs. The hero concludes that the distance from the knee to the bar shows less skin than that of other girls. The other students nearby begin to murmur, annoyed by that bizarre discussion. The students cover their legs in embarrassment, leaving the inspector in a very awkward position. With no way out, the inspector orders the girl to leave while Corona carefully pulls her away from danger. Sakura shyly thanks him for the help, and the protagonist replies that it was nothing serious. Still quite flushed, the girl sweetly asks him to try to forget about the measurements of her legs. The boy feels embarrassed and sincerely assures him that he will do his best not to think about it anymore. Shortly after, Inspector Kamiya enters the room announcing a surprise inspection of the students' backpacks. The students begin to complain, claiming that there'd never been that kind of rigorous inspection at the school. The man explains seriously that there are rumors of illicit substances and begins the inspection of the room. The students open their bags one by one, displaying their belongings for the inspector's close inspection. Shirashi nervously clutches her backpack as she anxiously awaits the inspector's approach. With an enigmatic smile on his face, the inspector orders the young woman to open her bag immediately for inspection. The girl hesitantly agrees, maintaining a very worried expression about what might happen next. She pulls the clasp of her bag in a shaky manner, revealing the contents of her materials to the inspector. The man leans over and begins to thoroughly search the inside of the student's backpack under her gaze. Suddenly, the inspector pulls out a small package containing a white powder, leaving a heavy atmosphere in the room. Shirashi is in complete shock when she sees the mysterious package emerging from her backpack. The man displays the suspicious package and falsely demands that the girl explain what it all is inside. The young woman screams desperately, claiming she knows nothing, but the inspector orders her to accompany him to the room. Classmates begin whispering in horror, wondering if the girl has been involved in crime. Shirashi tries to resist, tearfully stating that it's all just a terrible misunderstanding. Seeing the injustice unfolding before her, Corona jumps out of her seat and runs towards the inspector. Suddenly, a teacher with glasses steps into the boy's path and seriously orders him to sit down immediately. The teacher grabs the protagonist's shoulder tightly, yelling angrily at him to obey immediately. While the boy is prevented from acting, the inspector takes the opportunity to drag the girl down the long corridor. Corona grits his teeth in pure frustration, being temporarily prevented from saving his colleague at the last minute. Inspector Komiya finally locks the frightened student inside an isolated room at the school. The girl questions the deserted location, and the man reveals with a sinister look that the room is for personal use. He displays the substances triumphantly and sadistically asks what he should do with them now. Shirashi firmly shouts that this is not hers, and the man replies that he already knows all about it. With an extremely cynical smile, the inspector brazenly confesses that he was the one who planted the package. The young woman recoils in complete shock, asking the reason for this, while the man scoffs at her innocence. The villain approaches menacingly, ordering her to take off her clothes in an extremely cold voice. The girl stares at the inspector with wide eyes, completely paralyzed with panic at the abusive order. The man displays a frightening smile and says he will give her personal guidance by by ordering her to take off her clothes. Shiraishi trembles as she steps back to the wall while the teacher advances, extending his hands toward her in the room. Corona runs desperately through the corridors while the other teacher shouts at the boy to stop immediately. The hero ignores the call because he knows very well that he cannot leave his colleague alone with that cruel man. He opens the door to the guidance room shouting the girl's name, but finds the place empty. The young man stares at the deserted room and realizes with considerable concern that the two are nowhere to be found. The boy wonders furiously where Inspector Komiya could have taken the frightened Shiraishi at that moment. Suddenly, his cell phone starts vibrating, immediately drawing his attention in the middle of that silent search. The hero answers and Himuro urgently informs that the girl was taken directly to the old school building. The hacker angrily monitors the cameras, cursing the inspector's disgusting attitude for using that excuse. Himuro calls for haste on the phone because the villain is dangerous and Corona runs, quickening her pace up the stairs. The hacker smiles, remembering that calling the police would cause problems for his own business there at the school. The small hidden cameras scattered across the ceiling of the old school continue to secretly record everything. The protagonist runs at full speed outside the school, trying to reach the old building in time. As Corona approaches the location, she quickly hides behind bushes to assess the security of the entrance. He whispers into the phone, warning that there are suspicious guards standing right in front of the old school building. The hacker analyzes the images, confirms that those men are the same henchmen from the drug deal. The muscular henchmen assume fighting stances, ready to attack anyone who tries to invade the place. The hacker concludes that the men are allies of Komiya and decides to investigate the recordings further. Corona asks if there's another way, but her friend replies that the only way out is to break a window to get in. The boy considers that making noise would alert the inspector, causing him to act even faster against her. Himuro reveals the exact location, indicating the last room at the end of the west corridor on the 3rd floor from there. The hero locates Shiraishi's position on the mental map and decides to use his abilities to climb the building. Corona asks about support points on the outside wall, leaving the bespectacled young man completely confused. The hacker's eyes widen as he realizes the absurd and extremely dangerous plan the hero intends to carry out. The boy crouches down, wielding a small gardening tool focused on climbing the school structure. Although frightened, Shiraishi backs away until she is against the door of the warehouse. As the man approaches her, the girl desperately forces the doorknob, realizing through tears that the door is completely locked. The villain sadistically displays a syringe and coldly orders her to take off her uniform, because there is nowhere to run. She threatens to call the police, but the inspector dismisses her with utter superiority, telling her to try her luck. The man cynically points out that the entire class already believes the substances found belong to it. The teacher forcibly holds the girl's hand and robs the packet of drugs to leave her fingerprints on the test. The girl's fingerprints are clearly imprinted on the plastic of the suspicious powder package. The man smiles, stating that the police tests will incriminate the young woman, leaving her completely defenseless. Shiraishi trembles with terror upon realizing the cruelty of the plan hatched by the advisor to ruin his reputation. He comments on her parents' reaction upon learning what happened, leaving the student even more desperate. Despite her fear, the young woman takes a deep breath and stares at the villain with a sudden look of pure anger and strong determination. She tightens the package in her fist, realizing that the only physical evidence against her is that bag. Shiraishi concludes that if he manages to get rid of that package, there will be no evidence left against his innocence. The counselor becomes furious upon realizing the girl's audacity and grits his teeth in anger at the unexpected reaction. He grabs the young woman, shouting that he has the support of the feared Yakuza, and threatens to destroy her entire family on the spot. The man violently rips the collar off her shirt, blaming the young woman for her futile resistance in that place. Suddenly, a deafening bang echoes through the room as the window glass shatters into several pieces. The counselor is startled by the sudden noise and interrupts the attack, temporarily releasing the girl. The villain stares at the shards of glass scattered on the dark room floor, unable to comprehend who could have caused such destruction. Corona makes a spectacular appearance, bursting through the broken window and imposingly entering the warehouse. Upon seeing her classmate, young Shiraishi cries with immense relief, knowing that she is no longer helpless there. The hero positions himself in the center of the room with an extremely cold expression, as if he had come to annihilate his rival. His eyes gleam with deadly fury, indicating that the professor made the worst mistake by messing with his friends. The villain screams terrifyingly, unable to understand how the boy managed to climb the tall building all the way there. Corona calmly explains that she only used the supports of the outer wall, as she did in her old training sessions. Komiya starts sweating nervously as he realizes that the hero in front of him is infinitely more dangerous. The protagonist approaches and coldly questions him about his claim of having the support of the feared Yakuza. The man tries to regain trust by stating that the mafia will act immediately if the boy touches him. The hero merely listens to the cowardly threat with a discreet smile on his face, maintaining his absolute calm. He cracks his fists in a menacing way, concluding that beating up the villain will be his key to finding the mafia. The professor panics when he realizes that the threat of involving the criminals had no effect on him. He shouts tremulously, trying to warn about the real danger of becoming a great enemy of such dangerous people. With a completely icy stare, the hero replies sharply that he doesn't care in the slightest. Komiya is blinded by pure rage as he finds himself completely humiliated by the cold attitude of his young opponent. He rushes forward recklessly, shouting that insolent boys should only obey the orders of adults. Masamune delivers an extremely powerful and precise punch that hits the enraged aggressor squarely in the face. The impact of the punch throws the counselor's body backward, completely breaking any chance of defense. The protagonist silently concludes that no soldier entrusts their own life to an incompetent commander. The teacher's body violently collides with the classroom floor, falling brutally unconscious. On his cell phone, the hacker comments, laughing, that the protagonist really showed no mercy to his opponent. The hero begins searching the unconscious man's pockets, looking for clues to his criminal connections. The bespectacled friend offers to interrogate the man, but the protagonist refuses quite confidently. Himuro boasts about his digital skills and simply asks his friend to bring the defeated villain's cell phone. The boy retrieves the counselor's phone, agreeing to leave the technical aspects to the hacker. The protagonist finds the nickname, Intelligence Agent, curious and puts away his cell phone with complete peace of mind. The hero turns around and announces that the job there is finished, and that now is the perfect time to leave the area. Looking back, he notices that the girl remains silent, maintaining a rather apprehensive expression. The boy calls her name softly, trying to comfort her after that terrible ordeal. He gently extends his hand, offering help for the young woman to get up from the cold warehouse floor. The girl stares at him shyly and apologizes, saying that all of this is very confusing and difficult to understand. The hero listens to her with complete patience, keeping his calm and welcoming gaze focused entirely on her. Shiraishi takes a deep breath and asks the inevitable question, wanting to know the true identity of her savior.